the Border Management Agency yesterday, I think it was a Deputy Assistant Commissioner, who then told us, well, what had happened was they'd gone through the Zimbabwean side, they were stopped at the South African side because they didn't have their travel documents. And this happened over a sort of period. The Zimbabweans now say, well, no, they've got a completely different version. They say it was never 443 children. They say that during the period from the 25th of November to the 3rd of December, so that week, the 25th of November to the 30th to the 3rd of December, they stopped. 124 children were returned. Okay, so they went to South Africa and came and were pushed back by our authorities. So from 443 to what the Zimbabweans now say 124, 71 males and 53 females is, I think, the language that they used. That's a very strange story. I mean, very strange story. And it's moved from, one thing to another thing to something else. And in the end, it's about travel documents. And I remember the fight. Malusi Gigaba was the Minister of Home Affairs at the time. There was a huge fight around when a minor travels, they need to have both their parents with them or permission from both their parents, the reform of an affidavit and things like that. So there's a lot going on in this story, and I expect that it might still develop further. The situation in Gaza just getting worse and worse. The United Nations describing the situation as apocalyptic. And they say there is no safe place to go. In fact, Antonio Guterres himself, the Secretary General of the United Nations, saying there nowhere is safe to go to in Gaza. Another senior official, Martin Griffith, saying that such blatant disregard for humanity must stop. And what I understand now is that all of the people living in Gaza, which was 2 million, 2.2 million, I think, around there, are now living in the sort of southern third of Gaza. They're all now in that one small space. And before this, Gaza was always described as one of the most densely populated places on earth. So a very scary story that's developing there. We've had so many conversations around it. There are other things that have been going on in the last little while, and other sort of stories. The two-pot retirement system, we'll talk about that as we go through the show this morning. And what that really means is that you'll be able to take out 1/3 of the pension payments you've made over a year once. And then the 2/3 goes towards your retirement. But I think the maximum is 30,000 Rand that you can take out. There's still questions about it, and we'll do another mediated conversation about it probably next week. Let things sort of settle down a bit. And we've discovered sometimes with the mediated conversation, you don't do it quickly. Sometimes wait a little bit and then sort of go from there. Not always, but usually that works. You sort of take a breath and let people consider. What's interesting now is going to start on the 1st of September 2024. And there's a bit of an argument about this because the unions wanted it to start on the 1st of March next year. The retirement industry needs to manage all of its regulations and things. I think they were never going to get it done by the 1st of March. Not really their fault. They needed a bit more time. The National Treasury wanted to delay it for another year, and so the 1st of September is the obvious compromise. That's what it seems like to me, is that really seems to be what's happening. And then lots of reporting this morning, and I know Ray will talk about it a bit more, but Ebram Patel, the Minister of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, finally announcing how electric cars will be made, the sort of government policy towards making electric cars in South Africa. They expect electric cars really to sort of start being made here in about 3 years' time. Taking a long time to sort out the policy, if I may say. And I know the motor manufacturers have been very worried about that. And that's because the rest of the world won't buy internal combustion engines. They won't buy petrol and diesel engines soon. You'll have to make electric cars. We have a big car industry here. And, our entire sort of industry, our entire sort of world around that kind of thing is beginning to change. You know how it is. Lots going on this morning. As always, be very interested to hear your views on what's happening around Luthuli House, the NPA, the situation around electric cars, even the retirement system, the Zimbabwean children, whatever it is. We'll talk a lot about the elections and independent candidates from 7 o'clock. You know the number, of course, 086 000 2032, SMS 41391. You tweet SAFM Radio at Stephen Grootes, and you send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. Good morning, it's 6:15.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Normalizo Mandela, it's been a while. Good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good, all right, thanks. What's coming up today?
So, today, the Joburg fire story that was big for the longest time,
Yes,
where the
of
77 people actually died.
Yes.
So the Commission of Inquiry into that fire will be beginning its hearings today. This after it was delayed because they had to change the venue. So today it will be starting, and it will use that same venue at Saibono throughout.
I understand they want to recuse one of the commissioners, and the commissioner, an advocate, has made sort of comments that some groups say are xenophobic on Twitter. That's, so it's going to be a very interesting way to start that proceeding.
Absolutely. Surely all of those things will be ironed out, and all those announcements will be made today. So we'll know going forward what it's going to look like. So we'll be keeping an eye on that story.
Yeah.
And Parliament, the National Assembly, will consider the report of the Powers and Privileges Committee, which recommended 6 EFF MPs, including party leader Julius Malema, to be suspended for disrupting this year's State of the Nation address. Meanwhile, Stephen, the party wants the very same committee to subpoena the Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, to appear before it next week on the very same issue. It gave Parliament until close of business today to make or to respond to that demand.
And they walked out at the hearing in the beginning, didn't they? Okay.
Right. So we'll see if they'll be getting what they want. We're expecting that if that does not happen, obviously they will go back to court. They've already approached the High Court in Cape Town to have this issue addressed. So we'll see what develops from that story. And at the same time, in Cape Town, the DA will hold a presser giving their assessment of the performance of the 6th Democratic Parliament. The party says it will reflect on the progress to reform the national legislature in the wake of the Zondo report, as well as the work undertaken to hold not only the executive but also the ANC to account.
There'll be no gold stars issued today.
Absolutely,
I suspect.
Stephen.
I hate to spoil this for everyone, but no gold stars.
No doubt what the announcement will be there, so it's okay, but we'll still keep an eye on it. And then Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is expected to hold the judges' conference where matters involving judges will be discussed. He is expected to hold a press briefing afterwards. We'll be keeping an eye on this one to see if he will respond to some of the comments the former Chief Justice Mogoeng uttered last week.
That'll be interesting. And of course,
Absolutely.
Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's been in the news a lot recently.
So we'll see how that. We'll definitely be keeping a very close eye on that one. And of course, you mentioned this one, Stephen, the ANC demanding an apology from the Office of the Sheriff of the Court after, what do we call it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think asking for an apology may be taking it a bit strong, because I would be amazed if the sheriff didn't follow the normal rules and procedures. I mean, the ANC would have to show that they didn't.
Yeah, I'm really confused with this one. I really don't know what to make of it. Also, it will be interesting to hear from the actual company that is supposedly owed this money, if they will respond also on that, specifically on the issue of the ANC having approached the Constitutional Court to suspend this order. So we'll see the developments on that.
Normalizo Mandela, thank you very much indeed. We'll be listening on the radio 19 minutes after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, partly cloudy, isolated evening showers and thunder showers, 19 and 34. Johannesburg, partly cloudy, isolated evening showers and thunder showers, 16 and 33. Vereeniging, partly cloudy, isolated evening showers and thunder showers, 19 and 34. Bombela, partly cloudy, isolated showers, thunder showers, 16 and 27. Polokwane, partly cloudy, 15 and 33. Mahikeng, partly cloudy, 20 and 36. Vryburg, partly cloudy, windy, isolated showers, thunder showers, 23 and 36. Mangaung, partly cloudy, windy, isolated showers, thunder showers, 14 and 32. Kimberley, partly cloudy, 15 and 36. Uppington, partly cloudy, 19 and 35. Cape Town, partly cloudy, a light and variable wind in the morning, and 18 and 23. George, cloudy, light rain, a light to moderate southerly wind, 16 and 21. Gqeberha, cloudy, isolated showers and rain, a light to moderate westerly wind, 15 and 21. East London, cloudy, scattered showers and rain, a moderate southwesterly, 16 and 22. eThekwini, cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers, a moderate southerly wind, 18 and 22. Richards Bay, cloudy, scattered showers, thunder showers, a moderate southerly wind, 20 and 24. And Pietermaritzburg, morning fog, otherwise cloudy with scattered showers and thunder showers, 16 and 18.
Yeah, I'm sure Nelly has newfound respect for me. I had to sort her out, hey? Next time she keeps quiet while I'm talking to her, she'll think twice, I tell you.
Coach. And that'll be a perfect example to your son on how to treat a woman, eh?
Hey, man, now what does my son have to do with this now?
Man, Coach, you tell me, man. Look how you turned out and think deep. Pella, the cycle could end with you. Let us uplift the boy child and raise real men for a gender violence-free tomorrow. A message brought to you by Love Life. This is an SABC-supported initiative.
Hallo Michelise, hope you well. Listen, I went to this car heaven place We Buy Cars with Henriette to sell the caravans and the jet skis she must now got from the divorce because she's never going onto the Vaal River again, she says. So We Buy Cars bought it from her for a great price. Now, you should tell your husband to sell all of those project cars and take you to the Maldives. Or just give them a call because they come to your house and then they buy your car somewhere so on the spot where they're so gerieflik.
We Buy Cars, the best place to sell your car by far.
EFC is live this Thursday. 3 incredible title fights in one night. The welterweight strap is on the line as Mark Hume takes on Peace Ngopane. And the most dominant featherweight Iga Cabeza faces the only man he has lost to in 6 years, the Pitbull, Ronaldo Exon. Plus, the finishing machine Humphrey King Cobra Malenga takes on Kaleka Kabanda for the vacant lightweight title. EFC 110, watch it on SABC Sport Channel on DTT Channel 4 from 7 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
22 minutes after 6, good morning. Well, in South America, a large majority of people who voted in a referendum in Venezuela have said they want their country to control part of the territory of their neighboring country, Guyana. The territory is known as El Essequibo. Recently, oil has been found there. Around 2 million people voted in the referendum. The Venezuelan government ran a campaign urging people to vote for the idea that Venezuela should take over this land. There was no campaign opposing that. Professor Lyle White's a research associate at the Brenthurst Foundation and on the faculty at the Gordon Institute of Business Science. Professor White, good morning.
Morning, Stephen.
This is a long history, and in fact, it goes back to the colonial era. Why does Venezuela suddenly want this land?
Yeah, well, it stretches all the way back 150 years, Stephen, and it is something that Venezuelans have for a long time believed is part of their territory. Why it's come back up, there's two main reasons. The one is obviously oil, the discovery of oil in that Essequibo region, which also stretches across the border a little bit into the Venezuelan waters. And then obviously the Rattling Essequibo is part of trying to build some type of nationalism or nationalist pride in Venezuela at a time when the current regime is hugely unpopular and is facing a very, very interesting election in 2024.
So, I mean, if Venezuela wants it, the referendum says its people want it, are they going to try and take it? I mean, could they do that?
Well, I think that's the very interesting question. You see, the Guyanese opposed this and suggested that the referendum shouldn't take place, whereas the international community said that nothing should be forced or imposed in any way. But they went through with the referendum, and as you correctly stated, it's an interesting one. It was a 95% vote for yes. Let's include this into the Venezuelan territory. But it's a long way from actually claiming that area. And Maduro, for his part, the strongman president of Venezuela, has said he is acting in a constitutional and transparent and very, very peaceful manner to try and manage the situation. Bear in mind, once again, Stephen, as you said, this is not an issue that has actually has come to the fore in the last few decades. The dispute over Essequibo region, which, by the way, which makes up nearly 2/3 of Guyana and accounts for about 1/6 of their population. This has not really been contested by Venezuela because most of the South American neighbors, and including very importantly Cuba, the long-standing ally of Venezuela, have backed Guyana's claim to the land. And so this will raise unnecessary tensions over territory, something that we haven't seen in South America for over 100 years. And it's so I don't think it's something that's a foregone conclusion that this will actually take place. I think there's a long way to go, but it does raise unnecessary tensions in the region.
I mean, we know that our borders are still really colonial borders, and in a way they shouldn't be. It's difficult to try and change that. In South America, is it pretty much the sort of same thing? The history is quite different, but there's strong resonances in some ways.
Yeah, it's quite different, but I suppose many parallels, many similarities. That Essequibo region was annexed was taken by British rule back in 1899, and then because it was British Guiana, then they inherited that region, which was then obviously contested by the Venezuelans. But every single border in South America is contested. Literally every single border is contested, and so that in that way it's very, very similar to Africa and to Southern Africa in particular. But Stephen, I think what is really, really important about this really harks of the real proper unpopular regime playbook and trying to get some type of support where they don't have any support, because this was the one issue that, and let's face it, we know what's been going on in Venezuela and how far apart the various opposition parties and obviously the Maduro regime is. But this is the one issue that they might all agree on. It's a little bit like the Falkland Islands in Argentina, and let's hark back or remember back to 1982 and what that regime did to try and rustle up support for that dictatorship at the time.
So you don't expect any kind of conflict on the border with this?
No, not yet. No, it's a far away from that. And the other big issue here is that following this, the United States obviously reacted and sent the Pentagon to Georgetown, the capital of Guyana, as well as Brazilian troops also converged and made sure that they were aware of the situation there.
Professor Lyle White, thank you very much indeed. Research Associate at the Brenthurst Foundation on the faculty at the Gordon Institute of Business Science. 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Banyana, they're in WAFCON.
Look who's made us proud again. They'll be able to defend the CAF Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco next year. That's Banyana beating Burkina Faso 2-0 in the second leg of the final round of qualifiers. Took place in Pretoria yesterday. Banyana won 3-1 on aggregate after the two teams played to a 1-1 draw, and that was last Thursday. It's also a testimonial game for the long-serving Banyana captain, Janine van Wyk. Here's the winning coach, Desiree Ellis.
We gave them a chance like we did in the first leg. Great save by Kaylin right there in the beginning to keep us in the game. And at halftime, we said just be a little bit more patient, move the ball around quicker. Those one-touch passes, rather hold on to the ball and move the ball around because the spaces are going to open up. And eventually the spaces did, but we could have had a lead at halftime as well, with the chances we created. We said, keep going, it's going to come. And eventually it came, and then we were able to control the tempo and everything else.
Now, staying with soccer, the former Manchester United and Everton goalkeeper Tim Howard elected to the U.S. National Soccer Hall of Fame, and he will be inducted on the 4th of May next year. Howard was on the ballot for the first time and received 46 out of 48 votes for the Player Selection Committee. The 52-year-old Howard made 121 appearances with the U.S. national team from 2002 to 2017 and was in goal at the 2010 and 2014 World Cups. Here's the Manchester United and Everton goalkeeper Tim Howard.
Well, I can honestly say I'm humbled, I'm honored, I'm shocked. But in general, you play your career as you start as a young kid, and you dream about these days. You just try and be great or chase greatness, and all the things that go into that, the highs and the lows. And this is a culmination of we finally made it. It all came together and it was worth it.
On to rugby now. Fresh from winning the Dubai Sevens title over the weekend, the Blitzboks will begin their preparations for the Cape Town edition as the pools for the tournament were announced. Now, they were drawn in Pool A alongside Ireland, USA and Great Britain. The Blitzboks will be keen to keep their winning momentum going and hopefully claim a second title of the season. And finally, the English referee Tim Foley, who received death threats after acting as the television match official at the Rugby World Cup final, will step away from officiating Test rugby for the foreseeable future. Foley was TMO for October's final between South Africa and New Zealand in Paris, which the Boks won 12-11, and the All Black skipper Sam Cane sent off. The 38-year-old Foley says last month death threats were aimed at him and his family since the World Cup, and he had to warn his children's school as a result. Now, Wayne Barnes, who refereed the final, announced his retirement last month, referenced the online abuse he had faced, while family members were also targeted. We'll bring you more sports news on Sunrise. Headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. In the next half hour, we'll talk about crime in Deep Sloot. 7 people killed in vigilante attacks over the weekend. People there saying this is because government isn't hearing them. Well, we'll talk more about that. You with SFM leading the conversation. Stage 3 now, stage 4 later, 6:30.
And in the headlines, the ANC says it has laid criminal charges against members who are allegedly involved in fraud in the awarding of the Ezulwini investment tender. Yesterday, the KwaZulu-Natal-based marketing company was barred from attaching ANC assets at Lutuli House in Johannesburg. In other news, some political parties in Parliament say the IEC should now proceed with its preparations for next year's national elections. This after the Constitutional Court dismissed the application of the Independent Candidates Association to have the Electoral Amendment Act declared unconstitutional. And the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA's Shosholoza Mail from Johannesburg to Durban, is already at 50% capacity from its maiden trip on Friday. It announced at the weekend that the long-distance mainline passenger services from Johannesburg to Durban and Cape Town would start this month. I'll be back with more details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good morning. Here's the big one that you need to know about. KZN, never far away from a truck crash on a daily basis. Multiple trucks actually crashing on a daily basis, but this morning it's a big one. Closing the N3 between Linfield Park and Umlas Road in both directions. Durban bound, you're taken off at Linfield Park. Pietermaritzburg, you'll be taken off at Umlas Road. Considerable and significant traffic backlogs already. Vehicles and trucks stacked and backed for kilometres into this closure. It's a tanker truck that's collided and gone over the central barrier, and it's a spillage incident as well. So not only recovery of the truck, but also recovery and securing of that load. So major problems there. The R103, as you can imagine, taking a real hammering. That's the local alternative. Our advice is come out of Pietermaritzburg, use the R56 through Thornville, and then a cut back on the 623, the Umlas Road, bring you back onto the N3 at the Umlas Road on-ramp. Further to travel, little bit of cross-country driving, but it'll just keep you away from the closure of the N3. The big backlogs on the R103 local alternative as well. So Thornville, the way to go. Joburg, crash delays coming out of Benoni at this hour. There's quite a heavy queue. There's a collision between Tom Jones and Atlas Road. A couple of lanes of block traffic pushing back through Snake Road and working back towards the Pitfontein area. And Cape Town, just watch for a bit of slowing traffic inbound on the N2, just coming past Khayelitsha, looking a bit busy towards the R300. And load shedding around Platteville, Panorama, Goodwood and Parow, as well as Newlands, Claremont, Rondebosch East and Lansdowne on the other side of the M5. All of those areas are busy. They will get slow for the next couple of hours. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray McClarker, good morning.
Good morning. Hi there.
Asian markets and US markets, how are they looking?
Well, for a second straight day, both markets are down across the board. The investor focus is on the U.S. labor market. Data on the number of jobs created during November will be released on Friday. If the U.S. economy created many jobs, then the U.S. Central Bank might increase interest rates because consumers would be in a better financial position. So U.S. markets were mostly down yesterday, and before the US market officially opens later today, the futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each down 0.2%. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is down 1.4%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 1.8%, and China's Shanghai Composite is also down 0.7%, and the US dollar to the rand is 18.82.
And then we're going to make electric cars. That's within the next 3 years.
Yeah, Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Ibrahim Patel says fully electric vehicles may be built in South Africa within 3 years. However, it might take another 6 years before consumers can even adopt electric vehicles because they tend to be quite expensive. South Africa intends to build electric vehicles by using some of the climate funding already provided by the world's richest nations. The government plans to use about 160 billion rand already committed to build electric vehicles. However, Eskom blackouts and the logistics crisis might undermine the government's push towards electric vehicles. Vehicle manufacturers, including Toyota and Ford, have already complained about how difficult it is to produce vehicles in South Africa because of Eskom blackouts and the logistics crisis.
And then Sibanye-Stillwater cutting over 1,000 gold jobs at its Kloof mine.
Yes, Sibanye has already started cutting more than 1,000 jobs at its gold mining operations. 575 workers have been retrenched at Sibanye's Kloof gold mining operations in Johannesburg. Another 550 workers have accepted separation packages. This is part of a plan by Sibanye to cut 4,000 jobs to reduce company costs.
Ray Machlaka, thank you very much indeed. Ray, of course, back with us in an hour's time.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Juras Advocate Sipho Mantula, good morning.
Steve Ovo, refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
In Guinea-Bissau, what's happened there? There was this foiled coup. What's happened next?
Stephen, yesterday what happened, President Umaro Sissoco Embalo dissolved the opposition-dominated parliament, and there is no date that has been specified when will be the next date of the legislative elections. He has invoked this, Stephen, when there was a confrontation between the National Guard and the Special Presidential Guard last week, and this has caused tension now because we have vacuum now if you don't have a legislative powers or the parliament. Remember, their parliament, Stephen, was elected early this year in June 2023, where it is dominated by opposition. So President Embalo now, Stephen, centralizing power in the executive and in the presidency.
And then in Niger, a Russian delegation led by the Deputy Minister of Defense has arrived there.
Stephen, Yunus Beke Yekuruva is in Niamey post-July 26 coup that has happened. This is the first official visit by the Russian government to Niger. This meeting, it is all about signing documents on military cooperation between the Republic of Niger and the Russian Federation. We know, Stephen, that this visit also is coinciding with that the Russian delegation went also to Mali, Bamako, to the Sahel region. It means that this federation that is muted between Mali, Niger, Ouagadougou is coming to realization with the assistance of Kremlin or Moscow, assisting them on military aspects or military cooperation.
And then in Tanzania, the big storms there, landslides and torrential rains.
Stephen, this is the northern part of Tanzania, Manyara area, Kateshe, just outside the capital city of Tanzania, Dodoma, that it has caused flooding, that many people have died, 47 people, 85 have been injured with the landslide and torrential rains over this past weekend. We know, Stephen, there's COP28 happening, and President Samia Sulu had to leave COP28 and offer his condolences to the family, but also assisting them, Stephen, with the humanitarian help coming from his government. This is said, Stephen, as we know that El Nino has been having impact in East Africa region. Last week we did spoke about Somalia, we have touched on Kenya, now we have challenges in Tanzania, Dodoma.
And then in Africa, and several African governments defending their decision to send large delegations to COP28 in Dubai.
Stephen, the numbers, when you look at them, others are saying they are funded by the private sector. It's not by government per se. And when I look at the numbers, countries that are being accused is Uganda, Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, Morocco. And when you look at Kenya, they were saying 765 delegates, Stephen, Morocco 823, and Abuja sending 1,411. I don't know ours, Stephen, in South Africa, how many have we sent to COP28? But like I said, they are all defending it. Most of these African leaders and countries saying that they are being funded by the private sector, and others are part of the government delegation to COP28 climate conference in Dubai.
And then in our archives, you obviously have very important day, 5th of December 1924.
Stephen, a teacher, a lecturer, a lawyer, and former SRC president of Forte, the secretary of the then ANC in Standard 10, the founding and the first president of the Pan-Africanist Congress, a man who had a law for himself, Sobukwe Claus. Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe was born on this day. He will have been 99 years. It means next year it will be the centenary of Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. There is actually a march today in Gauteng, Stephen, in search of the voice of Robert Sobukwe. So as we remember Sobukwe, Stephen, we hardly even see the voice, hear the voice or see the images of Sobukwe rather than we are having the text of how can a man die better of Robert Pokrant. Asante Sana SG, as we are still leading the conversation. Sunrise being the one of the best radio actuality and news current affairs.
Thank you very much indeed, Sipho Mantula. Do appreciate it. Sipho, of course, back with us tomorrow. More from our continent through the day.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Good to hear from you this morning. That is the number. Maxwell on the line. Maxwell, hi. The ANC and the sheriff, go for it.
Good morning, Stephen. I've got two quick issues, but let me start with this embarrassment, Stevens, because it's back from court, coming to court. How do now the ANC wake up this morning and open a case against the same people that they want money from them? How did they know that those guys are coming yesterday? They need to deploy a security to protect Lituli House. I strongly believe, Stephen, this is a huge embarrassment to the ruling party. This matter has been going to court for many times and they are getting the same result. What is the difference with the Constitutional Court now? They need to pay the money. They need to pay the service provider who provided them with whatever they provided. In 2019, now we're in 2023, Stevens. ANC must wake up under Fikile Mbalula as the General Secretary of the movement. They need to sit down and make peace and find a solution to pay this guy, because it's an embarrassment to the organization that is huge, that is owing the service provider, Stevens. For me, it doesn't hold water, even if they can open the case against these guys. But the law has stated twice that ANC needs to pay the money. My last point, when you happen to get Zaikan, ask her why Moses Mabita, Stevens, Grootes, are being bombarded with caps, while we have so many stadiums in this country, and even the grass there. When I was watching TS Galaxy beating Amazon, the grasses has been faded. This coming weekend, EFF, they've got a gig there for the 10 Manifesto. The next weekend, it's another cup final of a beer cup. PSL need to wake up. We've got a lot of stadiums in this country to accommodate cup finals. Durban, Skatele, Stephen.
No, I hear you, Maxwell. I mean, there's a lot to it. I really do appreciate that. I mean, I don't know about, what's going on with the ANC and, why they did all of those things. But it's a very, very complicated story. There's a lot going on there. Voice notes as well coming through on 0614 104 107.
I feel so pity for Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, because now what is going to happen is going to compromise his integrity, his office, everything we are watching as South Africans. Stephen, you can't owe someone and then you rush to Constitutional Court. Backdate from 2019, why they didn't pay the guys? Good morning, Sakile from Emelo.
Sakile, thank you. Yeah, no, I hear you on that. All right, well, let's see how it all plays out. 17 minutes to 7.
SAFM 104 to 107. Nationwide.
Well, lots going on this morning. A group of people living here under the Zimbabwean exemption permit say they'll go to court to challenge a new condition placed on people who are staying here for the next few years under the Zimbabwe exemption permit. Over the weekend, the Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, announced the permits for people from Zimbabwe and Lesotho will now be extended until November 2025. As you know, the various court cases about this, I think this is a way of saying this is when it will finally end. I think that's the idea. One of the conditions of this is that someone living here under these permits cannot then apply for permanent residence in South Africa. Normally, once you've lived in South Africa for 5 years, you can apply for permanent residence. That is now being removed, as I understand it. Luke Mofaro Dzviti is the chair of the Zimbabwe Immigration Federation and Lesotho Special Permit Holders Association on the line now. Luke, good morning. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Good morning, and good morning to you all listeners to SAFM.
You're challenging this latest decision. I would have thought most people would have welcomed the decision because it gives you some certainty for the next 2 years. Why are you unhappy with it?
Okay, we are still, in the first place, I will let you know that we are still carrying on with our court case part B for Zimbabwe Immigration Federation. We are still not so happy with the recent announcement of the 2-year extension because the minister, remember when we went for Part A, he had flouted Paja Act of year 2000 Act, where you are supposed to consult with the affected parties before making a decision. Yes, he still hasn't made that right because, like I said last year on SAFM, that the problems we had last year, we still have them today. We still have them in 2025 because there is no reason why the TP holders' jobs must be ended in 2025, right? If they say no permanent residence, we expect to have another permit or some form of paperwork. Maybe we have to do IDs or something like that because one cannot be in the country for 16 years and not be expected to become a permanent resident.
Okay, so what you're saying is that someone who's been living here for such a long time, for any reason, should really be allowed to apply for permanent residence?
Yes. One who has been legal in the country for at least 5 years should be allowed to apply for permanent residence. But recently, the minister says they were changing names of the exemption permits, right? At first, it was dispensation of Zimbabwe permit, and then it was called Zimbabwe special permit, and then it was called Zimbabwe exemption permit. But the thing is, those who have been here for 4 years ended up being here for 13 years now. You see, they've been legal for at least 13 years. And in 2025, they will be legal for at least 15 to 16 years. What counts is that one has been legal in a country continually for 5 years. And Zimbabweans, in 2014, when we did the Zimbabwe special permit, they asked for a letter that one is permanently employed, not temporarily employed. And so when one is permanently employed, there's legitimate expectations that the permits will go on because if they accept that, people started buying houses. That's where we ended up where we are today and paying pension. You know, when you are permanent, it means you are going to work forever until you retire at the age of about 62. So most of the ZTP holders are still in their late 40s. They still expect to keep on working until they retire by the age of 62. And if the government says now we now only want critical skills, right? It's not a problem, but it should not start with those who are already legalized. It should start with those who should start looking for jobs now from South Africa.
Okay. Look, you'll know a lot of people oppose you being here in the first place. And they will say that you should, leave now. The ZEP should end now. I realise the courts must decide. And they'll also say there should be a plan to end the permit. The permit was introduced temporarily, and this must be true. The permit must come to an end at some point. I mean, and I realise that you want to stay here, but I mean, do you think you and your members would ever go home, or do you think that you have to plan to stay here forever?
Most Zimbabweans, as you know, when they turn 62, I don't think they would want to stay in South Africa forever, except for those who have bought houses here. But because most of them are permanently employed, you see, they need to continue working. And we do not expect exemption permits to continue, right? They must end. But they must end with an option where one can apply for permanent residence. And those who do not want permanent residence can get some form of paperwork until they retire. That's the whole thing. And the same also applies to some Lesotho nationals, because most of them have already spent 5 years in South Africa. Their life revolves around here. If someone in 2010 had a permit and has got a child who is now doing grade 7, for that child to just be stopped abruptly to go back to Zimbabwe, they are doing so too in languages that are not in Zimbabwe. If the child goes to Zimbabwe, he has to go 5 years backwards with education. And just not it. So that's why I'm saying this should not affect those who are already legalized. It should affect those who are applicants for the first time.
Luke,
that
thank
the government can say, now we only need those with special skills.
All right. Luke Mofaro Zviti, thank you very much indeed. Chair of the Zimbabwe Immigration Federation and Lesotho Special Permit Holders Association.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, after the vigilante attacks over the weekend in Diepsloot, it's emerged the number of murders in Diepsloot. It's almost doubled since the start of the year. In just 3 months, 35 people have been killed there. This weekend, 7 people were killed in mob justice attacks. The Reverend Tokwane de Tuche is a community leader in Diepsloot. Father de Tuche, good morning to you, and thank you very much indeed for your time. We've seen so many protests against the police in Diepsloot. Are the police and government, are they just not listening to the community there?
Good morning, Steve, and your listeners. The situation in Diepsloot it's worrying, man. I think when I reflected on it last night, this situation in Diepsloot, it needs all of us. Honestly speaking, I still believe that the police are trying, but it's not enough. Secondly, the engagement with the community, because community is the one that knows where the hotspots are. I feel, in a sense, or the other way, the police, when they do this, they exclude, except the MMC for safety in Gauteng. At least that guy, he is a civil servant. He serves the community. But this all happens, one, communities leaderless. Remember, there were those 3 leaders who were arrested. They can't be seen going to stop that mob justice, because tomorrow they will be framed as if they were part of that. And secondly, we do not see the police department responding in a very effective way. When it comes to protecting community, the police are taking too long to respond, or they react as the situation animates. Unfortunate.
I mean, what this means is that unless something changes, there's going to be a lot more violence, right? There will be more criminality, more murders. The community will be angrier and angrier. We saw 7 people killed in vigilante justice over the weekend. The same thing will happen again.
It must be clear, Steve, that is being condemned. No one has to kill anyone. It does not matter how a person is wrong, because there are legal and justice systems in South Africa. There is a rule of law. But the problem is, when community is leaderless, how will you help? Because the only thing that we can see, so long as also the politicians are playing politics with this issue, they're playing deep politics, and unfortunate, that won't help, because they are electioneering over this problem of Diepsloot. And that must come to an end.
I mean, it's just going to lead to more frustration. Do people even believe politicians there?
No, we believe in our politicians. We believe that politicians are human beings. They've got flaws. We can never stop engaging them. We can never stop talking to them, whether they listen or they don't listen. But we'll never stop engaging them, and we can never stop working with them. But it's worrying how this has been used as 2024 electioneering, the life of people here. All these political parties, they electioneering this. Remember, Steve, we went to Union Building. We had good proposals, we agreed. But when they come back with implementation, they call each other there, and you see that is politically aligned, and it's not response to the community and better the lives of the people. Unfortunate.
Reverend Tokwane de Tuche, thank you very much indeed. A community leader in Diepsloot. 7 minutes to 7.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Top story is the mess that is the N3 this morning. South of Pietermaritzburg, the road fully closed and shut between the Linfield Park off-ramp and Umlas Road. Trucks and vehicles stacked and backed for kilometres southbound, back to Ashburton, northbound or westbound, if you like, back through Camperdown. An enormous amount of pressure on the ramps coming off at Linfield Park onto the R103, coming off at Umlas Road onto the R103. There is an option to beat it. You'd come out of Pietermaritzburg on the 56, head down to Thornville, and then a cutback on the 623, the Umlas Road. You will hit a lot of congestion as you sort of run into that N3 Umlas Road interchange. So maybe you might want to just duck down on the 603, I think it is, down towards Camperdown. Try and on-ramp there. It'll be a little bit easier. Do the same thing if you're going from Durban through to Pietermaritzburg. Full closure, and probably will take a while to clear this up. Not only has the truck overturned, but also a major spillage incident on the highway that needs to be cleared from that tanker. Driving into Joburg, coming off the Ekurhuleni side, an earlier crash at Atlas Road has been cleared, but it's left a heavy backlog through towards the Daveyton side. The N1, not too bad this morning. Bit of traffic building between Pretoria and Joburg. Brakfontein down to Old Johannesburg Road. Beg your pardon, Brakfontein down to Olifantsfontein is about the extent of that queue. Cape Town looking busy again out of Tableview. You've got queues coming out on Marine Drive down to the first lights at Sunset Beach, and also the N7 South is on a heavy queue this morning. Plattercliff Road down to the Botsmansdam Road off-ramp. And the M3 heading into Cape Town, different traffic pattern this morning, queuing up on Wynberg Hill. Some delays towards the top of the hill as you come in from Constantia towards Bishop's Court. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
It's the celebration of the century, and you're invited. We've already given away almost 3 million rand with 56 daily vouchers won. Buy a new Ford before 31 December, and you could win a 50,000 rand voucher or the grand prize of us paying for your new Ford. Visit your nearest Ford dealer today. T&Cs apply.
Individual brilliance always adds a superb vibe to the team. Sami Sohail of Malawi holds the highest batting average in 2020 internationals. Dhruv Maisuriya of Botswana is the quickest to reach 50 wickets in 2020 internationals, and Francisco Kouana of Mozambique is the first player to score a century and take 5 wickets in the same 2020 internationals. Catch these African stars in action of the BNP Group Africa Cup this December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies invites interested individuals and stakeholders to submit written comments on the SABC bill. The bill seeks to repeal the Broadcasting Act of 1999 to regulate the continued existence of the SABC, to provide its governance, to amend the ICASA Act of 2000 and the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. For more information, contact the Portfolio Committee of Communications and Digital Technologies by emailing sabcbill@parliament.gov.za, directed to Hanjiera Sali. Agenda setting conversations of the day.
3 minutes to 7 the time. Vusi on the line from Midrand. Hello, Vusi. Long time. Go for it.
Yeah, morning. How are you, Steve?
I'm well, man. How are you?
Good. Look, Steve, was to speak sense to this illegal Zimbabwean and other foreigners.
He's not. He wasn't.
So
he's not. He's
here.
He's here legally, Vusi.
Not to this illegal foreigners.
Okay, the person we spoke to is here legally, but okay, go on.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that these guys, all of them, they think that for them South Africa is not. There's no law. They are just doing as they wish. Look, there's no way in which whereby, no matter how, no matter you might be illegal, as long as at the end of the day we are a foreigner, there will be a moment whereby your permit or your passport expires. Then you need to go back home. It cannot be that you are here then and even force yourself to be permanent citizen of South Africa. There's no way in which that can happen.
Yeah.
Whether they have hired you permanently or what, at the end of the day, you are still a foreigner. That's number one. There's number two.
But Vusi, hold on a second. Almost every country has a way that if you live in that country, you can apply to become a citizen of that country. And that's how it must be. I mean, there must be a way for people to do it, whether you're in Cuba or the United States or China or wherever. There must be a way. There's got to be a process and a proper legal process. And if you don't follow that process, or if the process says you don't actually get to be a citizen, sure. But it's not because you're born somewhere that you are defined by that for the rest of your life. It cannot be that.
Okay, let me move and tell you what's currently happening with the laws within the Home Affairs and what was the Minister of the Home Affairs said when he was addressing.
Quickly, Vusi, yeah?
Okay. what the minister said, since 2005, South Africa has never ever issued any permanent citizenship to any foreigners which are residing in South Africa currently now. Number two, any child who is born from foreign parents or one between the two of those foreign parents, it doesn't get a birth certificate, it gets a letter of birth.
Yeah.
That's what there is within the law. So there's no way in which this Zimbabwean will think one day when they wake up they would become citizens of South. There's no way.
Okay, Vusi, I'm gonna stop it there, I'm afraid, because there, as I say, there are procedures and things, and that's how it must be. There must be a procedure, and it must be legal. And as I said, when the cabinet decided to introduce the ZEP, it was a temporary measure. There must be a way for them to stop it as well. That must be the case. I realise it's very contentious, but we can't just say someone was born there, therefore they're defined by that for the rest of their lives. I mean, think about where that logic goes. Goes nowhere good, let me tell you. Lots to come. We'll focus on the Constitutional Court rulings about the elections next year, and some of it's quite technical, but it really matters, and it could have a huge impact on what will actually happen next year. You with SFM leading the conversation. It's Tuesday morning, it's 7 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour. ANC lays criminal charges over election campaign tender, and today marks 10 years since the death of Nelson Mandela. Good morning. The ANC says it has laid criminal charges against members who are allegedly involved in fraud in the awarding of the Ezulwini investment tender. Yesterday, the KwaZulu-Natal-based marketing company was barred from attaching ANC assets at Luthuli House in Johannesburg. This follows the party's failure to pay the company for election posters and banners provided in 2019. The High Court in Johannesburg ordered the liquidation of the ANC. The Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein also confirmed the order. However, ANC spokesperson Mahlengi Bengumutsiri explains why they have taken the matter to the Constitutional Court.
There are several procurement processes and policy breaches that, on the face of it, are tantamount to irregularities and fraud. Therefore, in fulfillment of the ANC's renewal agenda as mandated by the 55th National Conference, we believe it is pertinent to pursue all possible legal avenues in an effort to reverse questionable actions of the recent past. We're preferring criminal charges against those that are impacted, those that were found to have acted in fraudulent manners in the forensic investigation.
Meanwhile, Bengumutsiri says the former ANC president Nelson Mandela will always be remembered for his commitment to serve with humility. Today marks a decade since the death of the country's first democratically elected president. Madiba died in 2013 at the age of 95 following long illness. He served only one term after his election as president after the country's first all-race election in 1994. Bengumutsiri says Madiba has a legacy of selfless service to the people.
It should be introspective for many people who are Democrat patriots and those that come from the traditions of the progressive movement. I don't think that we should try and even compare the period of Nelson Mandela to the period of Ramaphosa in 2023, 2024. Totally different circumstances, but there is a common thread, which is a continuation of the transformation journey. Humility, service, never being tone deaf to what your people are saying to you in order to be able to serve them. So I recall even as we commemorate Madiba, that he stood for Palestine, and we want to say free Palestine in the name of Nelson Mandela.
Some political parties in Parliament say the IEC should now proceed with its preparations for next year's national elections. This after the Constitutional Court dismissed the application of the Independent Candidates Association to have the Electoral Amendment Act declared unconstitutional. Yesterday, the court found that the organization failed to make a case for the Act's constitutional invalidity. The association brought the matter before court after alleging that the Act disadvantaged independent candidates, the DA MP Werner Horn and Good MP Brett Heron.
Provided the legal clarity needed by the IEC in order for it to finalise its preparations to hold the elections as early as May next year.
And the argument that was made that it disadvantages independence in favour of political parties was not proven. The IEC can prepare for the 2024 elections, and the President can now also announce the date of the elections.
Residents of Diepsloot, north of Johannesburg, have called on police to work with them in the fight against crime. They have accused police of leaving the responsibility of to fight crime to residents. This after a vigilante group allegedly tortured and burned 7 people to death at the weekend. The group had accused the deceased of committing crimes and terrorizing the residents. Rufus Maswazi is a local councillor.
A possible solution is that the police are supposed to be doing their job as being trained to do what they're supposed to do whenever there is crime. So now, unfortunately, we are in a moment whereby the police have left everything to the community. Hence, you see the issues of vigilantism happening because it looks like the police themselves, they don't know what is supposed to be done. No matter how many vans you give them, as we speak now, if you go to the police station, there's abundance of vans there. There's a lot of police that are roaming the street of Diepsloot. Instead of them focusing on crime and getting rid of crime, they're doing funny things.
And finally, the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA's Shosholoza Mail from Johannesburg to Durban, is already at 50% capacity for its maiden trip on Friday. It announced at the weekend that the long-distance mainline passenger services from Johannesburg to Durban and Cape Town would start this month. These services were suspended in 2021 due to operational and network infrastructure challenges. PRASA spokesperson is Andiswa Makanda.
The duration of the Johannesburg to Cape Town is about 30 to 34 hours. We are transporting people within the approved speed of the railway safety regulator. We are also factoring in stopovers where we need to change the water, we need to refuel. Durban, you look at 18 hours. People will be able to get out of some of the towns that we'll be stopping at, stretch their legs, walk about, experience some of the historic towns along the route.
Recapping our top story this hour, the ANC says it has laid criminal charges against members who are allegedly involved in fraud in the awarding of the Ezulwini investments tender. Yesterday, the KwaZulu-Natal-based marketing company was barred from attaching ANC assets at Luthuli House in Johannesburg. This follows the party's failure to pay the company for election posters and banners provided in 2019. I'll be back with the headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I'm Nomalizo Mandela.
Nomalizo, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. This festive season, a little extra cash could go a long way. Outsurance could save you money on your car insurance premium. If they can't, you can ask for 500 Rand cash. That's a monthly saving on your current premium, or 500 Rand cash, or 1,500 Rand if you've been claim-free for 3 years with the same insurer. SMS out to 38462 to get a quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer, Banyana's Janine van Beek becoming the most capped African footballer. And more soccer, considered to be the original Soweto derby. Orlando Pirates will host Morocco Swallows at Orlando Stadium tonight. Let's find out more just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, the big story this morning, no change, apart from the fact the traffic volumes and queues are just getting desperately heavier and heavier. The N3, Durban to Pietermaritzburg, closed both ways between Linfield Park and Umlas Road. If you're on your way to Durban, the backlog starts almost at Market Road. If you're on your way to Pietermaritzburg, the backlog starts almost at Cato Ridge. Everybody Pietermaritzburg bound being taken off at Umlas Road, possibly Camperdown as well. And if you're on your way to Durban, the closure has you off-ramping at Linfield Park. The R1 103 is an absolute mess, as you can imagine. Trucks being allowed off the N3 and onto that route, so that's sort of just compounding the problems. The option that we see is Pietermaritzburg down to Thornville on the 56 and a cutback through to Umlas Road, or then the link road down from Umlas Road to Camperdown and on-ramp there. And you do that in reverse heading up to Pietermaritzburg, but make sure you've got plenty of time to get through because it's a mess. Just staying in and around Durban, the M13 approaching Hillcrest from Kloof is quite slow, and the crash coming into Berea on the N3, so an unusual backlog around Tollgate Bridge territory. Cape Town, no major incidents on the highways. The M3's a little bit heavier than normal. Constantia up through Bishop Court towards Paradise Road, and the N7 South is heavy this morning, coming from Dunoon through Plattekloof Road. Big queues down to off-ramp at the busy Bosmansdam Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
9 after 7, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Lots going on this morning, as you know. Well, we'll talk a bit about yesterday's rulings in the Constitutional Court around the elections. I think it's quite important, actually. We'll talk also about the two-pot retirement system in about half an hour from now. Big decisions made there. I've been thinking a bit, maybe I'm unreasonably excited by this, but I've been quite excited. Not that I'm going to go and do it this season, but I've been quite excited about the fact that PRAS has managed to get its long-distance railway services, passenger railway services running again, the Shosholoza Mail, from Joburg all the way through to Cape Town, and then, of course, from Joburg to Durban. And look, it takes a long time. There are some cheap rates there. There are different ways of doing it, different classes and cabins and compartments and all the rest. But just the idea of going on a long-distance train trip, going through the country and seeing the whole country as you go through. And you think one of the reasons it's important that we as Sunrise do a weather bulletin for you every morning is it reminds you of how big and how diverse the country is, that Uppington is not Cape Town, is not Messina, and I think that's important. Just the idea of sitting on a train, watching so many parts of the country go past you. You don't really see it like that in a car, do you? It's very different. Just thinking about that, something I really want to do soon. It's going on a long-distance train trip. You with SFM, it's 10 after 7.
Big stories of the day. Hashtag SAFM Sunrise.
11 after 7, good morning. A series of rulings in the Constitutional Court yesterday relating to how independents and political parties will compete against each other for seats in Parliament and provincial legislatures for the first time in next year's elections. In one case, the number of signatures required for an independent candidate to contest the elections was reduced from 15,000 to 1,000, which is the same as the number of signatures a political party needs to contest the elections. In other words, they now compete equally on the number of signatures, independents and political parties. But in another case, which relates to how independent candidates will need to run in a region, which is really a province, the court said the Electoral Amendment Act was constitutional. As I understand it, this is technical, but as I understand it, what this means is that of the 400 seats in the National Assembly, political parties can contest for all of them, while independent candidates cannot, which would seem to me to mean that independent candidates are at a disadvantage. To put it another way, it is technically possible for a single political party to win all of the 400 seats in the National Assembly, but it is not technically possible for an independent candidate to win all 400 seats because of the way independent candidates are assigned to a region or a province. Vali Musa was the chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee which looked at electoral reform, but the recommendations he made with the majority of the committee were not followed by government. Instead, government followed the minority findings. He joins us now. Mr. Musa, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
Some of this is very technical. Is what I've explained your understanding of what this means for independent candidates? It's fairer than it was, but it still, to me, doesn't seem to be completely fair between independent candidates and political parties.
Stephen, let me just say at the outset that I speak in my personal capacity here. The judgments are lengthy and very, very complex. And I think of necessity it should be so because the reform of an electoral system of its very nature will be complex. But if we strip everything and just look at the bare bones of what happened yesterday,
Frankly, I must tell you, it's a big game changer for the Republic of South Africa, because for the first time, it's going to be truly possible for an independent candidate, for Stephen Grootes to stand up and say, I'm going to register as a candidate, and I'm going to ask all of my listeners, people who know me in the SAFM, to vote for me because they know that I'm a good man and that I'm an intelligent man. And you can theoretically do that. All you would need to do is to collect 1,000 signatures to show that you are serious. You are a serious candidate to participate. But the interesting thing is that the 1,000 signatures that you collect, you would be able to collect it from anywhere in the entire province of Gauteng, because you're based in Auckland Park. And to collect 1,000 signatures from such a large number of people is not a difficult task for anybody who's going to be very serious. When Parliament originally passed the law, the political parties, the DA and the ANC, who essentially control Parliament, needed to provide for independent candidates because the Constitutional Court in an earlier judgment instructed Parliament to do so. So they decided they would do so, but they would make it so difficult that in reality it would be very, very difficult for any independent person to really run for elections. You would need to collect something between 10 and 15,000 signatures, which is not an easy thing to do unless you have a huge big machinery behind you. And that has changed to reduce the number from, say, 10,000 to 1,000. And that's a very, very big change. So I think that we're entering into a completely new era. We can expect a large number of independent candidates in all of the provinces to register. And I think that we will probably see independent candidates coming into Parliament in 2024. They will not be the majority because in the nature of things, independents, don't constitute the majority generally anywhere in the world. Political parties dominate, and I think that's the right thing to do because democracy as we know it needs political parties and functioning political parties. But the independents in our parliament will play a crucial role in terms, especially if no single political party gets 50% of the vote. So this is going to be a very big change that we will have. The other important thing about independent candidates is they will be in a position to speak their mind. Not one of them will be subject to a party line as such. So every time Parliament goes to vote on a matter, there will be a high degree of surprise in what the outcome would be. And the general public will have the opportunity to lobby Parliament very hard, knowing that the people that you can make change their minds would be the independent candidates. Because remember, political parties, take the DA or the ANC, would say, oh, well, that's our policy. It was decided at the National Congress. We can't change our minds on the matter. But independent candidates will be subject to public persuasion much more than political parties. So this is a completely new era. Let me say quickly the point you raised about the 200. What the Act says is that of the 400 members of Parliament, up to 200 can be elected can be elected as independent candidates. The other have to come from political parties. Now, I don't think that is necessarily wrong. You could argue that instead of it being 200, it should have been 300, 100, or you could make a different case there. The reason you need that is because of proportionality. Unlike the system in the UK, we have a proportional representation system. In the United Kingdom, or take for example in the United States, when Donald Trump was elected as the president, he did not get most of the votes. He got less votes than his competitor, but he was elected in terms of that system. So our system tries to avoid that by creating proportionality. And once you have proportionality, you need, in technical terms, what are referred to as compensatory seats. Those could be 200, 100, or any number as such. But I think the number is not that important. The important thing is that the system needs that. And the court said well, 200 is as good a proportion as any would be. And that's, I respect the court's view on that. Others have strongly been of the view that the compensatory seat should have been less than 200. That's also a legitimate point of view.
Okay.
But I think the important thing, Stephen, is that we got a different ball game coming up here right now, and it's an exciting time for us. And I would really say to everybody, go out and register. Make sure you register, because you're going to have the pick of the choice. If you don't like the political party you voted for in the past, if you don't like any of the political parties, you are going to find somebody on that list that you really like and you can vote for.
And Vali, very quickly, if we can, as I understand it, there might actually be more reform after the elections. This might be the only elections we have with this system. Do you believe we need further reform after this election?
No, we definitely need further reform. The current system, Parliament, for some reason, approved the new system, which we will be subject to in 2024, as an interim measure. And the law which amended the Electoral Act at the same time established a reform panel in order to create a new electoral system. So this will be changed, I believe. And in my view, I have very little doubt that in 2029, we will be voting for people in constituencies. In other words, not only independent candidates, but political parties will also have to put up their own candidates on an individual basis in constituencies to face the electorate. Right now, as you know, that those who stand as members of the political parties don't need to face the electorate directly. In the case of the DA, only Steenhuisen faces the electorate. The rest of them hide behind him. So you've got that. That will come to an. I think that will come to an end, and that's the reason that Parliament has established the electoral panel. In some form or another, it will come to an end. So there'll be another big change.
Sure.
So unfortunately, we're going to have 3 elections in a row with 3 different electoral systems.
Vali Moosup, thank you very much indeed. Speaking in his personal capacity, as he says, but was chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee, which looked at electoral reform. You're with SFM 21 minutes after 7. Professor Susan Boyson is Director of Research at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Professor Boyson, good morning to you. Vali Moosup is very excited. He suggests that we're going to have big changes to our politics. Do you expect there to be a large number of independent candidates in the National Assembly next year?
Good morning, Stephen. It is a possibility, but I don't think there's going to be a huge number. It's all independent candidates, prospective ones, will be very mindful of the fact that you need a large number of votes to get in there at national and regional or provincial level, where, as you may be known in your community, it would have been good for local, but in your community only, it takes a lot of effort and money and campaigning to transfer that kind of reputation into the national or provincial spheres. So there may be quite a number, but I don't think it will be a huge number. The bar has been lowered now, so it becomes much more feasible, which is a great thing for democracy, especially in a time where there's quite a bit of despondency about political parties. But still, we can also look back at small political parties in previous elections in South Africa. Quite a large number of them contested, and it's a handful, only a fraction really, that eventually made it into Parliament and didn't forfeit their deposits, etc. So those will always remain restraints, and it could be that prospective candidates come in very starry-eyed and think of new political futures, but if they do reality checks on prospects, they will probably try to save their either 20,000 Rand deposit, the likely deposit for contestation by independents for Parliament, or the 15,000 for provinces. That is not incredibly high, but still, not everybody would have that kind of money available, and we would be prepared to forfeit that.
So there are many different things going on here. Vali Musa makes the point, and I think it's a very interesting point, that you would be able to lobby independent candidates in a way you can't really lobby political parties. I mean, there's a current example. No one in the ANC is going to vote against the NHI, for example, because that's a party decision. Now, if things were closer than they are in our current parliament, and if opposition parties were, say, above 45% and the ANC was below 50%, independent candidates could suddenly hold the balance of power and could be sort of lobbied independently of political parties. Wouldn't the corollary of that be that our politics would probably become quite unstable?
It could very much be. We have seen coalitions at local government level, for example, that the tiny community parties, tiny parties, a handful of independents, even at local government level, there are only a few independents around the country. And they have been lobbied and they have become major players in those coalitions where the bigger parties, the ANC or the DA, just need a bit of top up in order to get to their 50% outright majority levels. And we've already seen that the ANC, as part of its coalition strategy for the next election, has alluded to that they will be targeting small parties, independents and community parties where their majorities are just a touch short of 50%. And we can imagine that this will be the case for all major party formations that may be trying to build up to that 50%. And yes, indeed, there can be a lot of instability in presence of small parties. It will be quite difficult to keep individuals in independence and to account on how they voted in parties. Okay, we know it often is not worth the paper it's written on, but there is a political party that can be held to account. And for independence, it could be very difficult to reach a person and to get out accountability out of a person like that. So it's not necessarily this amazing new change. It is a big change. It's a structural change. But in terms of the content of South African politics, I don't foresee that they're going to be bringing a huge amount of substantive difference to how our politics unfolds.
Is there any reason why someone could not, for example, say, knowing that the governing party, whichever they may be in the future, is going to get 49%, and say, I'm now going to campaign to be the Minister of Electricity, and I will give my position, my share of the vote, however it all works out, my voting seat in the National Assembly, to the governing party, so long as they do that. And someone could be very explicit about it, could literally be their entire campaign. Suddenly they're in a very interesting position.
Certainly, that kind of position will make a big difference. I think it will take a huge amount of persuasion, though, to entrust an individual like that with a huge mandate like that, and that individual will have to slot into the structure of the party that is recruiting her or him, and such a person will then be taking possible possessions from people in that party. So that will be a very strange and complex relationship. And should the person actually come to the fore and have that kind of gravitas to carry that with credibility, then that could make a difference. I want to see those people emerging first.
Professor Susan Boyson, thank you. Director of Research at the Mapunkubwa Institute for Strategic Reflection. Really appreciate the time. 27 minutes now after 7.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Everyone's talking about Janine van Wyk.
Oh, so iconic. The South African legend hanging up her boots, and that's in the women's game. Now, she made her 185th appearance for Banyana in their 2-0 Africa Women's Cup of Nations qualifying win over Burkina Faso yesterday. A lengthy career that started way back in 2005 at the international level for Van Wyk saw her leading the team to their first FIFA Women's World Cup qualification in 2019, having also captained the team at the 2016 Rio Olympics in Brazil. Now, with her family in attendance yesterday, here's the Banyana's long-serving captain, Janine van Wyk.
overall, this has just been the cherry on top of the cake of a lengthy career for me. A great fulfillment for me reaching this milestone. And yeah, what better way to do it with the national team at home? And yeah, it's been a long journey with Banyana Banyana. There's been many ups and down moments, but these are the kind of moments that one strives for, to achieve every single dream that you have planned out for yourself from a young age. And just reaching this last one is, like I say, a great fulfillment for me. So thanks for all the support.
Janine van Wyk here on Sunrise. Now, soccer action will see the so-called original Soweto derby. Orlando Pirates will take on Morocco Swallows at Orlando Stadium tonight at 7:30 p.m. Although unbeaten in their last 3 DStv Premiership encounters, the Buccaneers have been struggling to find the back of the net in recent times. Now, the Blitzboks, who started their 2024 Sevens campaign on a high note in Dubai, will run out in Cape Town as the top seeds for the tournament this weekend. The South Africans have been drawn in Pool A with Ireland, Great Britain and USA for what promises to be an action-packed 2 days of rugby at Cape Town Stadium. Here's the Blitzbok captain, Selvin Davids, looking forward to playing in front of the South African crowd.
There's always big expectations in Cape Town because it's our home crowd, but we're gonna enjoy this win, and then coming back on Tuesday when we get back together, we're gonna forget about it, put it behind us, and just focus on Cape Town and just trying to replicate what we did this weekend.
And finally, golf. Tiger Woods felt he made significant progress after completing 72 holes in his latest comeback from injury at the Hero World Challenge, competing for the first time since undergoing ankle surgery. After withdrawing from the Masters, Woods carded a closing 72 in the Bahamas to finish level par for the week and 18th in the 20-man field. Here's Tiger Woods.
I'm curious, just like you guys, what this is going to look like. I haven't done it in a while. I haven't done it with my ankle the way it is now. And I was excited to, each and every day to kind of get through it and kind of start piecing rounds together again. I mean, I haven't done this in a long time, so it was fun to feel that again. And every day I got faster into the round.
We'll have more sport on Sunrise. Headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning to you. We'll be talking about the two-pot pension retirement system in the next half an hour. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Stage 3 now. Stage 4 to look forward to, 7:30.
And in the headlines, the Independent Candidates Association says it has accepted the Constitutional Court's judgment dismissing its joint application with Build One South Africa. The two organizations approached the court earlier this year seeking to have the Electoral Amendment Act declared unconstitutional. They argued that it restricted the participation of independent candidates in elections and the National Assembly compared to political party candidates. In other news, the ANC says it has laid criminal charges against members who are allegedly involved in fraud in the awarding of the Ezulwini investment tender. Yesterday, the KwaZulu-Natal-based marketing company was barred from attaching ANC assets at Luthuli House in Johannesburg. And the U.S. has returned 4 antiquities worth $1 million to Nepal, which include the pair of 16th century kilt copper mask. Details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Top story this morning, the N3 closure between Linfield Park and Amlas Road. It's a full closure because of a tanker crash. That tanker's gone over the central barrier and ruptured and lost its load. Now, this is a phrase that I'm hearing from recovery teams and people involved in this. The phrase is most of the day. It's going to be a long closure. This is not going to clear quickly. The reason being the load is molasses. So it's a hot mess on the roads, and it's a very sticky mess that needs to be cleared up. So if you're driving Pietermaritzburg to Durban across the course of certainly this morning and possibly into the afternoon, make sure you've got plenty of time to get through. The N3 full closure, south at Linfield Park, north at Amlas Road. The R103 is just heavily gridlocked. There's been trucks coming off the N3 and piling onto that R103, for example. That route is backing up from Ashburton all the way down through Linfield Park and down to Amlas Road. It's not much better coming off at Camperdown up into Amlas Road and through Linfield Park as well. The alternative route, the R57, M26 via Thornville, cut back to Umlas on the 623 will work, although it'll be busy, particularly as you come back into that traffic around Umlas Road, but it'll sort of just keep you moving south of Pietermaritzburg. You do that in reverse if you're heading up to PMB. And if you've got flights to connect with down in Durban, make sure you're setting off well early to get through all that. Just down into Durban, some delays again this morning, repetition of what we saw yesterday, queues from the M7 through Spaghetti Junction into the work zone, and then a secondary queue from Queen Nundy Drive up through Kormashu. Joburg's N12 stays heavy after an earlier crash from Putfontein moving through towards Atlas Road in the Benoni area. Very slow. Cape Town today, M3 jam-packed from Constantia up through Bishop's Court area, and the N7 South is heavier than normal as queues coming from Dunoon side through Plattekloof Road all the way down to Bosmansdam Road. Still no lights either Kuberg Road at Plattekloof, so some extra delays out of Tableview. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The Business Update on SAFM.
Ray McClark, good morning. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, in the current trading session, both markets are down. The investor focus is on the US labor market. Data on the number of jobs created by the US economy in November will be released on Friday. And if the US economy created many jobs, then the US Central Bank might still increase interest rates because consumers would be in a better financial position. So there is a possibility that interest rates might still rise, and investors do not like this. US markets were mostly down yesterday, and before the US market officially opens later today, the futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each down 0.2%. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is down 1.2%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 1.7%, and China's Shanghai Composite is also down 0.7%. And our local market, the JSE, was up 0.3%, and the shares of retail companies were the biggest gainers of the day.
And then the Finance Committee in Parliament, finally, September 2024, the two-pot retirement system will start.
Yeah, the National Treasury and Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance have reached a compromise around the two-pot retirement system. The system would now be implemented on the 1st of September 2024. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana proposed a new date. Once implemented, the system will allow people to access about 33% of their pension savings before retirement. The Treasury and Parliament's committee were in conflict about the start date for the retirement system. The committee previously wanted the system to be implemented on the 1st of March 2024, which the retirement industry believed was not feasible, and the Treasury originally proposed implementation to be on the 1st of March 2025.
And then Nampak, they lost 4 billion rand.
Yeah, Nampak is South Africa's largest packaging company. It is facing problems on many fronts. During its 2023 financial year, it suffered a financial loss of 4 billion rand. The problems were mainly at Nampak's Nigerian operations, where it suffered big losses due to the depreciation of the Naira, the local currency in Nigeria. Shareholders of Nampak had to come to its rescue by providing it 1 billion rand. Nampak says it is now over the worst and will not be looking for further support from shareholders.
Ray McClark, thank you very much. Ray, of course, back tomorrow. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, calls coming through, as you can imagine. Mpho on the line from Johannesburg. Mpho, hi, the ZEP.
Hi, and how are you?
I'm well, go for it.
I would just like to point out, I work within the travel industry and with a lot of foreign officials. It is up to South Africans to keep the integrity of our country and to protect it. It will not profit us in any way to gun the foreign policy. Working with government officials, I will attest to the amount of corruption that our own officials are involved in on a daily basis. Bribery is the order of the day in every port of entry. Most of these foreigners are not coming through the Crocodile River. They are brought in by South Africans who cannot uphold the integrity of this country and protect it. I work with them on a daily. It is a norm. It is an everyday thing. And when you try and be the one who upholds it, you are the one in danger. So as much as we can gun for the foreigners, it is a daily act. Our own are putting us in jeopardy. I would like the government to be aware that they can change the policy, but they cannot change the attitude of South Africans who are supposed to be protecting our borders. It is beyond out of control. I don't know what system will be implemented, but something has to be done because it is our own. It's not the foreigners. I can attest to it. I can even say 70% of them are put into the country by our very own government officials. I can deny somebody entry into South Africa in a space of 2 days. They'll come back to say, ma'am, you are going to book me a ticket. I am going to Paris. I've got my passport, because someone at immigration or one of our own has given them a fake passport, or not even a fake, a legit South African ID.
So
and now I have to allow that person to travel to a foreign country like Dublin, where South Africans don't need a visa. And most foreigners are aware of the advantages of carrying a South African passport or ID. They go into foreign countries, they do crime, and then the rest of the world recognizes that person as a South African. So I don't know where it's going to work, but it is our own. As much as we can deny foreigners, but if he comes to me after 2 days from bribing somebody at Home Affairs with a South African passport or ID, I don't have the power to say I'm not booking you further on for international travel.
Sure, and Paul. So it's so the entire situation that we have is really all because of corruption, right? I mean, that's what's in a strange way led to this. This is what places so much pressure on the whole system.
Definitely, I agree with you, because I am in that situation daily. So they can burn and kill foreigners, and they can blame them for every criminal act, but it's because they've allowed them to come into the country.
Sure.
They can Operation Dudula all they want, but the core is the integrity of our own, who are selfish and fail to think for the future of our children. I'm telling you that there's incidences where on a daily basis, even the very airport staff can brag that I have not touched my salary because they live on bribery from customs itself.
Sure.
This is the issue. It's not foreigners, it's us.
Yeah. And Paul, thank you. On the line from Johannesburg, it's not foreigners, it's us, she says. Sure, what a call. And what an interesting way, what an important way, I think, to look at this problem. And we've heard, and I think, so many people will talk about what Paul says, how difficult the issue of corruption is. There's so much to this. And Paul, thank you. And thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's really important. You with SAFM, 19 minutes to 8.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
So Parliament now seems to have finally agreed that the new two-part pension system can begin on the 1st of September next year. Under the new system, you'll be able to take some of the money out of your pension. So once a year, as I understand it, you'd be able to withdraw 1/3 of the money you've paid in that year. You would not be able to take out the rest of the money. In other words, you can take money from the smaller pot, but not the bigger pot, which will be for your retirement. Christopher Axelson is the Acting Deputy Director General for Tax and Financial Sector Policy at the National Treasury. Christopher, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Morning, Stephen.
There's been a huge amount of discussion about this. Unions wanted it to happen as early as possible. They wanted it to start early next year. You wanted to delay, I think, until 2025. How did you come to this date, the 1st of September next year?
Yes, I think we recognize a lot of the concerns from our proposal of 1 March 2025. I mean, we were more worried about making sure that this implementation wasn't rushed, that everything was in place, that members knew exactly what this new system meant. But of course, we do acknowledge that there is some concerns that we need to get this in sooner. We've been speaking about it for a few years. So 1 March 2024, which was put forward by the committee, was just quite difficult. There was, the minister wrote a letter to the committee to say that there were a number of concerns about even getting that date. But 1 September 2024 to the middle of the tax year next year looked to be a reasonable in-between point, and the institutions that we've spoken to and the funds that we've spoken to have said that they will be ready by that date. So luckily it was agreed upon, and hopefully we can have a smooth implementation then.
Right, Christopher, I'm going to ask you to talk as loudly as you can, please. It's not a very strong line. The pension funds, the people who manage the money, there's a lot of administration they need to do, right? And that's one of the reasons for the delay. It can't just happen like that. It actually, there's regulations that they need to follow to do all of this. How complicated is that?
Yes, I hope this is better and I hope you can hear me. It is difficult. It is difficult for these funds to get all of these measures through. It's one of the biggest reforms that we're going to be doing on the retirement side for years. And we changed the tax treatment of contributions in 2016, and we changed how Provident Fund benefit payments are paid out in 2021. But this is by far a much bigger change to the entire system. So it is complicated for those administrators. We haven't promulgated the legislation yet, so the legislation isn't quite in place, but we have had a round of draft legislation for them. And there are lots of different moving parts. There are the current benefits that you will have had up until September, and then there are these new benefits and these two new pots that will be going forward, and those administrators need to deal with all of those aspects. So I think the public should hopefully realize it is a complicated reform, but 1 September should hopefully be a date where everybody can get everything ready and it will go ahead smoothly.
I mean, some of them might actually not be able to sort out all of the admin before then. Are you worried? I mean, is that possible? Are you worried about that?
I'm a little worried, but they have said that they will and that they can. So we really hope that all these funds are ready by then. They have committed to it, and it'll be a big problem if they're not ready. So our assumption is everybody will be ready by 1 September.
Okay. Christopher, a couple of sort of almost questions just to understand this, because we've had lots of calls on the two-pot pension system, and just a couple of them off the top of my head, a couple of queries which keep coming back. I want to make sure of this. So when you pay your money in every year to your pension, so at the end of the month money goes into your pension fund, when you take out the money from the smaller pot, that money that you can take out, is that only money you've put in the last year? It's not money that was put in before. Is that right?
Well, it depends. So it can't be money before 1 September 2024. But if you've put in money into the savings pot, which is the 1/3 of your contributions, if you don't take that money in that year and you leave it there for a year and you leave it there for the second year and you leave it there for the third year, then you can take the full amount out of that savings pot in the third year, all the contributions you've made for those 3 years, if you want to. But we would hope it's only for emergencies and if you really, really need it.
And that's only from the small pot, the big pot stays?
The big pot will need to stay until retirement, yes.
And then if you leave your job, now, currently, I think in many cases you can access your full pension. So people do this, which is one of the problems, but they'll take their full pension. So now, after this reform, so after the 1st of September next year, if you leave your job, can you still take your bigger pot, or is that always untouchable until retirement age?
So at the moment, all the contributions before 1 September 2024 will still be under the old rules. So if you were to leave your job, you can still take all the amount that you've contributed from before 1 September when you resign from your job. But any future contributions from after 1 September, you cannot take when you resign or are retrenched. You will need to, that will stay in the system until retirement, but you can, of course, take the 1/3 savings pot.
Okay, so there would be a situation where now, if you get fired, if you lose your job and you're, say, 50, you'd be able to take your full pension. Once this reform comes, you would not be able to do that. And that might mean you would have to wait until, retirement age before you can access the second pot.
Yes, and that's why the savings pot is crucial, that we need to educate members that this really is for emergencies. So people should try and keep that money in there, and then if they were to resign, they can take that 1/3 savings pot if they need any funding.
So, I mean, you could have people who have no money except for the money in their pension pot and are basically waiting just for a birthday.
Why a birthday? Well, it doesn't have to be on the birthday if they take that amount, but they can take it whenever. Yeah.
No. But they're waiting to reach retirement age, so someone could, stop working at 58 for whatever reason. They lose their job, so they stop working. They take out the money that they can take out from the first pot, but the money from the second pot is still not touchable until retirement age.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, we have spoken with Labour about potentially looking at a phase 2 where under very, very strict circumstances there might be access to that pot, but only under very, very strict circumstances. The problem in our current system is that because we have this ruling where everybody can take the full value of their pension when they resign, then nobody actually saves for retirement. So our retirement outcomes are actually very, very poor because all that cash is taken before retirement. So it's a huge improvement in the system to preserve more money, to force people to keep it to retirement. But because this is phased in and all the previous funds can still be taken when anybody resigns, we don't think that that exact example that you're talking about will happen within the next few years. But we have mentioned with Kasatu and Labour that we will look at very, very, very tight circumstances where there might be access to that pot. But that's not part of these proposals today at all.
Christopher Axelson, thank you very much indeed. Acting Deputy Director General for Tax and Financial Sector Policy at the National Treasury.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. A reminder of the top story on the roads. If you're just joining us, is the closure of the N3 between Pietermaritzburg and Durban. Full closure both ways due to a truck and tanker crash and a lost load. And the lost load is molasses, and it is going to take some time to clear this up. You might find that the Pietermaritzburg bound carriageway opens, but Durban bound probably closed for some time. The queue on the Durban bound extends right back through Ashburton, back towards Market Road. Unbelievably congested R103 route through Ashburton, Polly Shorts area, coming into Ashburton, down through Linfield Park and Umlust Road. And a lot of congestion as well around the Umlust Road, 623, N3 off-ramp. So motorists scrambling or being taken off at the closure points and hitting those alternatives. Even the route that links Camperdown through to Umlust Road, the 603, or partially 603, that's a very heavy queue as well. The R56 has some traffic between Pietermaritzburg and Thornville, which you would expect as well, because that's one of the alternatives. So whatever route you're taking, if you've got to go between Pietermaritzburg and Durban, make sure you allow a ton of extra time to get through, and particularly on that Durban-bound carriageway, which is, say, likely to be closed for some time today. Also staying in KZN, a crash at Hillcrest on the M13, approaching Old Main. That's as you arrive up from the Kloof area. In fact, I beg your pardon, that crash is closer to Cassia Road. It's after the Old Main Road, so on your way towards Key Ridge, it's heavy. Also, Durban's N2 from the M7 through Spaghetti Junction's heavy. Another queue into a breakdown further up, just through Komashu Highway towards Gateway. So repetition of the two queues that we saw yesterday. Jebbo coming in from Benoni. The N12 is starting to move. An earlier crash here really did back things up, but it is looking a bit easier now. N3 Germiston to Edenvale's heavy. N1 Bayers Nordia round to Ravonia, looking quite slow this morning. And Cape Town, a lot of pressure still on the M3 inbound. Constantia through to Paradise Road. Localised congestion through Wynberg Claremont area due to some load shedding in that area. And worth a mention, the N7 South, very heavy this morning from Dunoon all the way through Plattercliff Road and down towards the Bosman's Dam Road exit. N7 South heavier than normal. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
A loving partner shouldn't take away your choices. Your choice of clothes, your choice to wear makeup and cut your hair. A loving partner shouldn't choose your friends or choose how you spend your time. A loving partner shouldn't control who you speak to. If your partner is controlling your choices, it's abuse. Get help now. Dial Tears *134 *7355# or visit tears.co.za. An SABC supported initiative.
You see, change happens and it improves our lives. Change is good. It opens doors to new horizons and leads to a more informed tomorrow. Being in the know is no longer for the selected few. Information is for all of us to enjoy, whenever, wherever. Sunday World, putting the latest stories, sports results, exclusive video content, and celebrity news at your fingertips. To stay informed, download the Sunday World app today. Available on the App Store and Google Play. Sunday is just the start.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
8 minutes to 8 the time. Good morning. The inquiry into the Marshalltown fire that saw at least 76 people being killed in that hijacked building due to resume today. But at least one group is now asking one of the commissioners, the advocate Talani Makobele, to recuse himself because of comments he's made on social media. I looked at his Twitter or X bio this morning. It currently says, admitted advocate, former member of the Johannesburg Bar of Advocates, South Africa for South Africans First. Memelto Sibay is president of the General Industry Workers Union of South Africa, Gawusa, but also coordinator of the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign. Memelto, good morning.
Morning to Stephen and morning to listeners of SAFM.
Why do you want Talani Makobele to recuse himself as a commissioner?
I mean, as you just said to yourself, Commissioner Makobele has, over a long period of time, and you can look at his social media posts, especially between 2017 and 2018, he has relentlessly been waging a xenophobic campaign. He has been echoing, retweeting, and sharing the post from Operation Dudula. And we do not think that a person with such values, with such xenophobic and anti-immigrant sentiment should be a commissioner in a commission of inquiry meant to investigate the plight as well as, of course, the death and the injury of many of the residents of Alberton Fire, many of whom are also the migrants that were staying in that building.
I mean, so it's interesting to me to ask why he was appointed in the first place. Do you think this is a Gauteng provincial government inquiry. Do you think they knew his views when they appointed him?
Well, I'm not so sure, but all that it reflects in any way, Stephen, is the sentiment of the city of Johannesburg, the sentiment of, Gauteng government, but a sentiment of the entire political elite, which from the day one, they've been bashing migrants, they've been bashing the victims, they've been blaming the poor for the tragedy, but also for the crisis of housing, which we argue is a crisis of their making.
So, Memelto, this argument moves in different directions because some people are going to suggest what you've shown by now asking for Mr. Makobele to recuse himself is that you've shown that this is all about foreign nationals and that actually weakens your argument. In some places, you will know, Memelto, we get hundreds of calls on this, and many people are very sort of angry at the number of foreign nationals in South Africa. The point I'm trying to get to is that you may have a strong legal case here, but in the court of public opinion, it may actually weaken people who, who believe that foreign nationals shouldn't be living in Joburg.
Well, Stephen, would any South African agree that a judge or any, member of the tribunal that is meant to investigate, a sex crime against women should be somebody who hold a very sexist views against women? Would you agree to that? Well, definitely not, because that compromises the integrity and the credibility of the crisis. The integrity and the credibility of the process of the investigation. There is absolutely no way that you would expect that such a person would be impartial, that such a person would discharge his duty in a way that, of course, merits the kind of justice that I think the victims of Alberton Street deserve, but also how we go about addressing the crisis of housing, because at the core of this problem is the abdication of responsibility by the city and other levels of government to provide adequate housing, not, only for people of Johannesburg, but across the country. We live in a country, Stephen, where 13% of the population is in formal settlements. The housing backlog is growing. It was 1.5 million in 1995 when this government took over. Today it's at 3.7 million. More and more South Africans, including Johannesburg, where the housing backlog is 500,000 strong. And the government is only building about 2,500 houses per year. That is not a creation of the migrants. Is a reflection of the broader crisis of service delivery in this country.
Memelto Sibay, thank you, President of Gawusa and coordinator of the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
We mentioned a little bit about, travelling long distance by train, those two Prasa Shosholoza mail services from Joburg to Durban and Joburg to Cape Town up and running again. Some people have decided to do it by bicycle instead. The Jozi to Takwini cycling tour starts, in fact, today and goes all the way through until the 9th. Stundin Nkosi Majozi is the chairperson of the Jozi to Takwini cycling tour. Stundin Nkosi, good morning to you. Thank you for your time. Why do you want to cycle from Joburg to Durban?
No. We started this initiative about 4 years ago, where a group of guys, I think just a group of guys were interested in making a difference, We just got together, we thought, how could we make a change, and touch people's lives. So we got together, we said, it would be nice to ride from Gauteng, Joburg, to Durban, and then along the route, try and make an impact in whichever way that we can. So, the first year was, was still quite new, and we had very few guys that were interested. We started off with about 9 guys, and then throughout the year we'd ask for donations. Whoever would make the call, ask for donations. Whoever would want to help, and then so we're very lucky that this year is our 4th year. We've grown in leaps and bounds, over the years where our group has become much bigger.
And the route that you use, do you go on the N3? I don't know if it's actually legal to cycle on the N3.
We're not cycling on the N3. We use the old road. So currently we actually start for the interview and passing through Free State. So we're not on the N3, which is actually it's much longer than driving on the N3.
Yes.
So we actually end up covering 751 kilometers instead of 550 kilometers from Joburg to Durban.
I know the Transport Department, I think, is backing you on this. And cycling, in a way, as a form of transport, and I cycle for recreation, but as a form of transport could really change our country. Do you think drivers actually understand how important cyclists are? Sometimes I think they just ignore us.
No, I think what we're doing is really making an impact because, in the past, say, 10, 15 years, people were not really understanding what we do and they didn't understand the rules. So a part of our tour as well is to make, that awareness on the road use as well. That we also deserve to be on the road, especially when doing something good for our community. So I think slowly but surely they're starting to grasp the idea that we also, need to be part of the bigger community.
Stundin Nkosi Majozi, thank you. Good luck with the rest of the trip. Chair of the Jozi to Takwini cycling tour. You were there, SFM, leading the conversation. It's 8 o'clock. Outsurance will go out of their way to try and save you money on your car insurance. If they can't, ask for 500 Rand. SMS out to 38462. Now that's good news.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour: Concord's judgment on Electoral Amendment Act accepted and electioneering blamed in the high crime rate in Diepsloot. Good morning. The Independent Candidates Association says it accepts the Constitutional Court's judgment dismissing its joint application with Build One South Africa. The two organizations approached the court earlier this year seeking to have the Electoral Amendment Act declared unconstitutional. They argued that it restricted the participation of independent candidates in elections and the National Assembly compared to political party candidates. Independent candidates now only need 1,000 supporters to register to contest next year's elections. The association's chairperson, Michael Louis.
We accept the judgment of the court because they found that the Parliament passed the rationality test, and that the rationality test is that Parliament makes the laws and the judiciary can't interfere with that. So we have to accept that, because I know they have applied their minds. The problem that I've got, how do I stop my independent candidates now from forming civil society organizations or forming part of or joining political parties? Because why must they get double the votes of political parties?
The ANC says it has laid criminal charges against members who are allegedly involved in fraud in the awarding of the Ezulwini investment tender. Yesterday, the KwaZulu-Natal-based marketing company was barred from attaching ANC assets at Lutuli House in Johannesburg. This follows the party's failure to pay the company for election posters and banners provided in 2019. The High Court in Johannesburg ordered the liquidation of the ANC. The Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein also confirmed the order. However, ANC spokesperson Mahlengi Bengumutsiri explains why they have taken the matter to the Constitutional Court.
There are several procurement processes and policy breaches that, on the face of it, are tantamount to irregularities and fraud. Therefore, in fulfillment of the ANC's renewal agenda as mandated by the 55th National Conference, we believe it is pertinent to pursue all possible legal avenues in an effort to reverse questionable actions of the recent past. We are preferring criminal charges against those that are impacted, those that were found to have acted in fraudulent manners in the forensic investigation.
Meanwhile, Bengumutsiri says the former ANC President Nelson Mandela will always be remembered for his commitment to serve with humility. Today marks a decade since the death of the country's first democratically elected president. Madiba died in 2013 at the age of 95 following a long illness. He served only one term after his election as president following the country's first all-race elections in 1994. Bengumutsiri says Madiba has a legacy of selfless service to the people.
It should be introspective for many people who are Democrat patriots and those that come from the traditions of the progressive movement. I don't think that we should try and even compare the period of Nelson Mandela to the period of Ramaphosa in 2023, 2024. Totally different circumstances, but there is a common thread, which is a continuation of the transformation journey. Humility, service, never being tone deaf to what your people are saying to you in order to be able to serve them. So I recall even as we commemorate Madiba, that he stood for Palestine, and we want to say free Palestine in the name of Nelson Mandela.
Community leader Reverend Tokwane Ditoge has accused politicians of electioneering instead of solving the high crime rate in Diepsloot, north of Johannesburg. The residents have called on police to work with them in the fight against crime. They have accused police of leaving their responsibility to fight crime to residents. This comes after a vigilante group allegedly tortured and burned 7 people to death at the weekend. The group had accused the deceased of committing crimes and terrorizing the residents. Reverend Ditoge says the situation in Diepsloot is worrying.
This issue, they playing deep politics, and unfortunately, that won't help because they are electioneering over this problem of Diepsloot. Remember, we went to Union Building. We had good proposals, we agreed. But when they come back with implementation, they call each other there, and you see that is politically aligned, and it's not response to the community and better the lives of the people.
And finally, the U.S. has returned 4 antiquities worth $1 million to Nepal. They include the pair of 16th century kilt copper mask. The BBC's Lipika Pellam has the details.
This comes amid growing calls for Western countries to repatriate stolen cultural artifacts to their countries of origin. The New York authorities said the 2 masks representing the Hindu god Shiva had been stolen in the mid-1990s after a series of break-in robberies from a private home. One of the items was seized following an investigation into a convicted antiquities smuggler, Subhash Kapoor. Since 2022, the US has returned more than 1,000 pieces worth nearly $200 million to 19 countries.
And recapping our top story this hour, the Independent Candidates Association says it accepts the Constitutional Court's judgment dismissing its joint application with Build One South Africa. The 2 organizations approached the court earlier this year seeking to have the Electoral Amendment Act declared unconstitutional. I'll be back with the headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I'm Nomalizo Mandela.
Nomalizo, thank you. Those were the top stories for this hour. Don't miss out on a possible car insurance saving SMS out to 38462 for a quote. Outsurance, where you always get something out. Is balancing your income statement harder than hitting a winning run in a high-stakes cricket match? Try Outsurance for a game-changing strategy against the rising cost of living. If they can't beat your car insurance premium, ask for 500 Rand cash. That's a monthly saving on your current premium or 500 Rand cash. Claim free, and with the same insurer for 3 years, ask for 1,500 Rand instead. SMS out to 38462 for a quote. That's out to 38462. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's apply.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports headlines, cricket. The Proteas will face India in a 3-match series with the shortest format starting on the 10th of December. And in rugby, the Blitzbokke will run out as the top seeds. That's at the Cape Town Sevens this weekend. We'll find out more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, the full closure of the N3 still in place. This is between Linfield Park and Umlas Road. I've seen videos and we're posting them up on Twitter or x.com at Traffic SA. You can keep up to date with what's happening there. You can see the load, you can see the truck, and you can see the recovery guys righting that truck. But the problem is the load. The load is molasses, and that will take some time to clear. Could be a while is the phrase that we're hearing from the recovery team. So massive traffic backlogs, you can imagine, into the closure point coming out of Pietermaritzburg. R103 between Ashburton and Camperdown effectively jammed all the way with the diverting pressure. Even if you've done the Thornville run and arriving back into Umlas Road, that is heavy as well on that 623 coming up towards that congestion on the N3 at the Umlas Road exit. So whatever route you're taking, make sure you've got a ton of extra time to get through it. Just down into Durban, a crash on the M13 between Old Main Road and Cassia. If you're on your way through Hillcrest towards Key Ridge, that is very slow going as well. Joburg, bit of traffic. Randburg through to Sunninghill on the N1. Germiston through Edenvale on the N3 going north. And Cape Town, the standout this morning, again out of the Tableview area. You've got a long queue of traffic on the N7 from Dunoon to Bosmansdam Road. It is much heavier than the northbound side. And Marine Drive stays backed up from Sunningdale right through to those first lights at Sunset Beach. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
9 after 8, good morning, you're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. We'll talk about crime and Cape Town, and particularly on Table Mountain in just a moment. Don't forget your mediated conversation, the Road Accident Fund. There is so much to look at going on around the Road Accident Fund at the moment. We thought we'll take a deeper look at that and just find out a little bit more about it. Just while Normaliza was reading the news there, a statement from the ANC on their media WhatsApp groups about, of course, what's happened with the company Ezulweni. They say the ANC owes them 102 million rand. And the ANC saying that they're told Ezulweni that they were taking the matter to the Constitutional Court, that postpones the execution of the decision of the Supreme Court of Appeal. They say they find it curious that despite that, failed attempts were made to proceed with an attachment order. This is how we ended up with the sheriff of the court outside Latuli House yesterday. The ANC goes on, we can only conclude this is an attempt to create a spectacle where none is warranted. They say that in the case of Ezulweni Investments, their procurement processes and policy breaches that in the face of it are tantamount to irregularities, possible corruption and fraud. And I should remind you, I think it's 9 judges have found that there was a contract. And so the story is going to go on for a little while. But the ANC also saying it's held successful conferences and paid off some of its bills. So a lot going on in that story. That statement just coming out now, 10 after 8.
Get ready for an adventure of a lifetime with SABC TV Licenses Ultimate Competition. Feel the pulse-pounding excitement of a Bundesliga match live on an all-expenses-paid journey you'll never forget. Or embrace the rhythm of your dreams at the Coachella Music Festival. The choice is yours. A football fan's paradise or a music lover's haven. Simply pay your TV license, then head to www.winnerholidayWithSABCTVLicenses.co.za for a chance to win big. And don't forget, there are incredible weekly prizes up for grabs too. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Gautrain is for the legends who make moves to save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand. Is for our clever who turn 5-liter bottles into workout dumbbells, and for the slim oaks who bring a home-cooked scuff team to work every day. So when it comes to travel, make moves that save and pay from as little as 45 Rand from Pretoria to Midrand Station. Gautrain, for people on the move.
Brighton and Hove Albion are going all out to brighten their clash against Burnley FC with maximum points.
A dinger again, that was a masterpiece.
However, Burnley FC will display a sense of urgency to move up from the relegation zone.
Dariola has scored! Down the middle! Burnley lead! Shane Rodriguez!
Who will have a great day on the field of play? The Seagulls or the Clarets? This is the Premier League. Catch the exciting clash between Brighton and Hove Albion and Burnley FC on Saturday, 9 December at 4 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies invites interested individuals and stakeholders to submit written comments on their SABC bill. The bill seeks to repeal the Broadcasting Act of 1999 to regulate the continued existence of the SABC, to provide its governance, to amend the ICASA Act of 2000 and the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. For more information, contact the Portfolio Committee of Communications and Digital Technologies by emailing sabcbill@parliament.gov.za, directed to Hanjiera Sali. Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
Good morning. You know the number, of course, 086 000 2032. There's been a spate of crime incidents around the sort of Table Mountain area in Cape Town. The thing about Table Mountain is it is kind of iconic. So if you're trying to attract tourists to come to Cape Town, to come to South Africa, Table Mountain matters. As much as some of us like to make jokes about Table Mountain, there are 10 incidents in August, 6 in September, 13 in October, and a couple of others really quite recently. Enver Dermany is the CEO at Cape Town Tourism. Enver, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Thank you for being with us this morning. Firstly, Table Mountain as an icon, as a symbol of Cape Town, how important is it?
Stephen, it's critically important. I think it's been rated as the seventh wonder of the world. We know that Table Mountain Eagle Cableway has won global awards. It's also having a natural wonder in the heart of a city. So it's quite iconic. And it's even in the school books of Chinese kids. So it's quite popular. And for us as Cape Town Tourism, it's critically important to use our icons as we use that in our marketing to attract tourists for both business and leisure.
So when you have robberies on places like Lion's Head and Signal Hill, I mean, that's very damaging for you.
No, absolutely. I think for us, when it comes to crime, unfortunately, it is now spread into popular areas like Table Mountain. And of course, it's not only tourists being attacked, it's also, of course, locals. So it's a big concern for us. And what we are pleased about is the fact that both the city of Cape Town, SAPS and Sandparks have deployed more on-the-ground foot patrols, including also drones and the eye in the sky technology. So hopefully that starts assisting us with, identifying areas and hotspots before they become those hotspots. And of course, if an incident does occur, looking after the tourists as quickly as possible.
It becomes, it's impossible to secure. Parks in Joburg or eThekwini and other places all have the same problem. It's really just impossible to actually secure it. And what that means is you need foot patrols, you need people to be alert, but there's no way you can make it perfectly safe.
Unfortunately not. And I think that's the sad bit about what we're having to face and challenge. However, I think the beauty of having, it's so fully accessible means that anybody from all over Cape Town can literally access Table Mountain as a natural seven wonder without having to pay to access that. And I think, again, that's the beauty of having such a wonderful asset in the heart of our city.
Looking ahead to tourism this year, there were times before the pandemic, if you were in Cape Town and some of the sort of city centre areas or the suburbs, you really didn't hear South African accents at all. Have you had those kinds of summers again? Are you still getting people coming for the Southern Hemisphere summer in Cape Town?
Yeah, we have those swallows, of course, and it's great to hear them. I think post-COVID, what we've actually seen is a flattening of what we used to call the seasonality curve. In fact, the international tourist performance compared to pre-COVID in 2019, we far surpassed that. I think if I look at the numbers, we were sitting about between 104 and 116% above the 2019 numbers, and 2019 was considered the best year for tourism in Cape Town and in South Africa. So we are definitely seeing that. But I think what's also more encouraging is also we're getting a lot more of the locals coming down to Cape Town already a lot earlier than anticipated. And when we look at our forecasting and our surveys, it looks like we're definitely going to have a packed summer season with both international and locals enjoying all that the Mother City has on offer.
We'll look at the phrase Mother City one day, Enver. The issue around, we know that lots of people from, say, Gauteng, middle-class people have been trying to move to Cape Town. They call it semigration, things like that. Is accommodation becoming a problem?
Well, I think, when you're looking at the popular areas, of course, accommodation would be a challenge. I mean, right now, occupancy levels are exceptionally high. Again, this is why we talk about people needing to book a lot earlier, and you can also take advantage of the discounted offers. And then, of course, there's so much across the entire Cape, and even if you look at as far as Stellenbosch, Paul, there's so much still on offer. And I think, again, the sooner the people can book, the sooner they can secure their holiday experience without worrying about where do I stay when I get here.
You sell it well, Enver. Enver, thank you. Enver Dermany is the CEO at Cape Town Tourism.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Derek on the line from Durban. Derek, hi, good morning, good to talk again. Cigarettes.
Yes, good morning, Stephen. Morning, listeners. I stay here in Natal, and there's a little pub at the bottom of the valley. Don't allow children, no drugs, nothing. It is a well-run little side of the road pub. And in the evening, the farm workers come down there. They buy their 2 loose cigarettes and maybe a black label. They all sit at the river and they go home. Do we really need parliamentarians making legislation to deny those poor people that have actually slaved all day their 2 cigarettes? I think it's just the poor man just gets nailed all the time. And I just feel that they should have much more to do to worry about that. They're comfortable. They've got the Mercedes. They've got the air conditioning. They've got the blue label whiskey. They've got everything. Don't deny the poor man his 2 cigarettes. Thank you, Stephen.
No, Derek, thank you. All right, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't thought of it in that way. I know, and technically now the sale of loose cigarettes is illegal. Been illegal, I think, for a long time. But I understand the point that you're making. Is it really such a bad thing for someone who's been working all day? It's a really interesting way of looking at it. Derek, thank you. I mean, conversations around tobacco, do go on for a very long time. 086 000 2032.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
Well, of course, at the moment with COP28, the climate change summit happening at the moment, huge conversations around climate change and around how to move to cleaner power sources. And while in South Africa we have huge arguments about it all the time, some of them on this show, there's also, for the last 12 years, we've actually been running a program that other countries could look at. It's the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program. And one of the key decisions that you have to make when you're a government is you have to work out how you're going to buy power from independent power producers. It can be very, very complicated. Julia Taylor is a researcher in climate and inequality at Wits University. Julia, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
So, I remember when the program started, the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, and almost immediately people said this is actually a very good way of doing things. What did the program do that everybody liked? What was right about it?
So the program managed to attract investment in renewable energy in South Africa at a time when it was actually a kind of emerging industry. There was quite a lot of uncertainty about the technology around renewable energy, but the program provided guarantees from the state, which encouraged independent producers to really set up renewable energy ahead of the curve.
And were other people not trying to do the same thing? Other countries were slightly ahead of us with renewable energy. Was this a different way of doing it?
Yes, a kind of key difference was that we had it is a competitive bidding process. So the utility or the IPP office puts out a call for bids, and then companies have to put forward competitive bids, which are judged based on price, but also on local content development and local development initiatives. So what was quite, I think, impressive about our system was this procurement process with competitive bidding, which got kind of relatively lower prices compared to what was going at the current rate internationally. But at the start of the program, it was really getting competitive initially. But as time has gone on, renewable energy has decreased in price so significantly that we've actually realized that we should have been a bit more adaptive in our process, because now we have 20-year agreements with a fixed price. And because prices have dropped so significantly, it's actually meant that we're spending quite a bit on those 20-year agreements. So one of the kind of initiatives that we think should be changed or addressed in the reprogram is to rethink those contracts so that government isn't stuck with this guaranteeing high prices for the private sector.
Okay, so I mean, the people who did this first had to take the biggest amount of risk. It hadn't been done before. And then at the time, the technology said the price was X. Now the price is much lower than that. And I suppose the people who've taken the most risk have taken the highest profit, but they're taking quite a big profit. I mean, it doesn't really seem to have worked out in our favour at all.
Exactly. That's the kind of balance that you're always playing with when you're kind of addressing a new technology. And so government justify the process, saying that there was so much uncertainty, they couldn't have known that the prices would drop so significantly. But now I think we do know better. And so with the new REAP rounds, we really need to rethink how we address these contracts to allow for adjustments in pricing so that government doesn't keep kind of subsidizing private profit.
At the moment, Julia, as I understand it, I think it sounds like you're at a conference, so I'm presuming you're actually at COP28 in Dubai at the moment. When you look at the debates and the tone of the debates, I mean, we hear the communiques and we hear the reports, but the actual tone of it, the mood of it, do you get a sense that this is a summit that is actually going to change things?
So yes, I'm here in Dubai at COP28. The mood is very different this year from last year. I had my first COP experience last year in Egypt. And while both have been fairly bizarre in that they are kind of massive, large-scale events where a huge amounts of energy are being used and not extremely efficiently, this one does feel particularly strange because of the massive scale. So last year there were about 30,000 people in attendance. This year it looks like more like 90,000. And apparently the people who are increasing kind of our participation are kind of, private sector entities who are now jumping on the bandwagon. And so there is a bit of criticism about who is allowed to attend and what that means for the outcomes of the negotiations.
And the fact...
and I think...
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. And the fact that it's chaired by someone who actually also runs an oil company on the side, I mean, that's quite strange. He's been under a lot of pressure this week.
Yes, he has. But there's been some interesting reports that his statement about saying that the science doesn't necessarily support a phase-out were potentially misreported, I think is quite interesting. But I attended a meeting this morning with the researchers' constituency at COP, and there's an argument that he should be asked to correct his statement, but kind of acknowledging what the science is arguing for, which is maybe not a phase out of fossil fuels by 2050 exactly, but actually a reduction by specific percentages by that date. And so he needs to be, I think, very careful in how he's phrasing this discussion about fossil fuels. It's very clear that we need to significantly reduce fossil fuels in order to reach our Paris Agreement targets. And preferably, I think activists are arguing that there should be an kind of pledge to achieve net zero by 2050, which would mean a complete phase out. So it kind of depends who you're speaking to. Researchers and evidence shows that in order to reach the targets, we need to significantly decrease. Activists would say we need to completely phase out.
Julia Taylor, thank you. A researcher in climate and inequality at Wits University, currently at COP28 in Dubai, 27 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. India are coming here.
Yes, that's right. So we'll be hosting them in a bilateral series that gets underway on the 10th of December 2023 with the first T20I taking place in Durban. Now, the Proteas as well as India are looking forward to this tournament. Both nations naming their squads for all three formats. Aiden Markram will captain the Proteas in the T20I and the ODI series, and comprising of 3 matches that will be, while KL Rahul will lead the India ODI squad against the Proteas, and they'll be without several regulars, including Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli and Hardik Pandya. On to rugby, the Blitzboks, who start their 2024 Sevens campaign on a high note in Dubai, will run out in Cape Town as the top seeds for the tournament this weekend. The South Africans have been drawn in Pool A with Ireland, Great Britain and the USA for what promises to be an action-packed 2 days of rugby at Cape Town Stadium. Argentina will face Fiji, France and Spain in Pool B, while defending champions Samoa will face New Zealand as well as Australia and Canada in Pool C. The Blitzbok captain Selvin Davis, who says being victorious in his first outing as captain, says the good competition amongst the squad forces everyone to work hard and stay honest. He was also named player of the final.
To be player of the final, it's not something I play for, because I know it's going to take a team effort. So to get a individual award is not that special to me, but to get a team award is something different.
Let's go to the Commonwealth now, where Australia is unlikely to be able to host the 2026 Commonwealth Games, and sports officials have called on the International Federation to consider bids from other countries. The city of Victoria originally was awarded the 2026 Commonwealth Games but withdrew earlier this year, citing cost overruns. 3 locations outside Australia have reportedly expressed an interest in hosting the Games, which are likely to be postponed to early 2027. And netball, Khamogelo Maseko says she's in no rush to move overseas, even though her creative moves in the attacking third were pleasing and captivating to viewers around the world. The goal attack and goal shooter was part of Norma Plummer's squad that faced Netball World Cup champions Australia in a 3-test match that took place in October. The Gauteng Jaguars player's performance was so impressive, she scored herself the most valuable player accolade in the second test, with South Africa lost 67-52 and eventually lost the series to the Diamonds. Now she says she will focus on finishing her degree at the University of Pretoria before she can think about pursuing a professional career in another country. And that's how we wrap up your sport on Sunrise. We'll bring you more on SFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thank you. We'll obviously be looking at the Road Accident Fund. That's coming up next year with SFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
And in the headlines, the former chairperson of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Electoral Reform, Vali Musa, has highlighted the value of independent candidates to the country's political system. This after the Constitutional Court dismissed the application by the Independent Candidates Association and Build One South Africa, which sought to have the Electoral Amendment Act declared unconstitutional. In other news, community leader Reverend Tukwane Dituche has accused politicians of electioneering instead of solving the high crime rate in Diepsloot, north of Johannesburg. This comes after a vigilante group allegedly tortured and burned 7 people to death at the weekend. And a spate of robberies at township-based schools in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro in the Eastern Cape has forced the Education Department to close the schools and moved the teachers to schools closer to the city to complete their end-of-year operations. More details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
No change on the N3 corridor between Durban and Pietermaritzburg. The road remains closed and will do for some time. The truck that crashed across the central barrier has been righted. They've got that back on its wheels, but the real concern is the spillage, which is molasses, which will take some time to clear. A tanker full of molasses on the N3. So full closure from, it looks to be now Camperdown through to Linfield Park. So that's the extent both ways of the N3 closure. And then you've got some really heavy traffic on the highway approaching the closures, and then dreadfully, heavily backed up pressure on the R103. The R103 basically queues from Cato Ridge through to Ashburton both ways, and it's particularly heavy around Linfield Park, around Umlas Road, and around the Camperdown area as well. So if you need to go Durban, Pietermaritzburg, you need to put plenty of extra travel time on, particularly if you need those flights down on the King Shaka International side. You're coming from Pietermaritzburg. It's enough to seriously make you panic unless you know about it, and you've got that significant time to get through. Just staying in KZN, a crash on the M13 this morning between Hillcrest and Key Ridge, still causing delays. That's for motorists heading towards the N3. Joburg easy up quite nicely. Cape Town, the big backlogs on the N7 South from Dunoon to Bosmansdam Road. That's all worked their way through. And if you're driving Eastern Cape today, the N2 will be closed for 3 hours between Makanda and Fish River Pass for blasting. 2 p.m, 5 p.m. is the closure. That'll repeat on Thursday of this week as well. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
28 minutes now to 9. The time for your mediated conversation this Tuesday morning. Over the last few months, there's been a series of developments around the Road Accident Fund. The fund is meant to pay the victims of car accidents. If you have an accident, your treatment is supposed to be paid for by the Road Accident Fund. This is paid for by a levy. Whenever you buy fuel or petrol, a portion of the amount you pay per litre is then paid over to the fund. The fund uses that money to help the victims of car accidents. But in the last few years, the fund has made two major changes. First, it said it would use a new accounting standard, meaning that it manages its money differently. The Auditor General has refused to accept the standard. The Accounting Standards Board has also said it cannot use this standard. Also, the fund has stopped reimbursing medical aids. In the past, a medical aid would pay for the treatment of a road accident victim. If they were covered by that medical aid, the fund would reimburse the medical aid. Now the fund says it will no longer pay out those funds. The Road Accident Fund says it will no longer reimburse the medical aid. The Constitutional Court has ordered it must pay the medical aids. It is still refusing to do so. Yesterday, the medical aid group Discovery confirmed it's going back to court to get a contempt of court order against the Road Accident Fund. So what is going on and why? First this morning, you'll hear from the Road Accident Fund in a conversation we had with their spokesperson, Macintosh Pelela, on Friday. Then you'll hear from the Chartered Accountant and Analyst Kaya Satola. We'll ask him if the Road Accident Fund does have a case. And then the consequences of all of this. The business writer at News 24, Carol Payton. We start then with the conversation with the Road Accident Fund spokesperson, Macintosh Pelela. We spoke to him on Friday, and I asked him why the fund was changing its accounting standard.
Well, look, there's a lot of things that we needed to fix. One of those was our responsibility as far as our legal bill is concerned. I mean, we needed to fix the way that we did things. We were able to, drop that legal bill from around 10.6 billion to now 3.7 billion. And there's a lot of things that we needed to do differently to be able to fix our finances, because the fund was being threatened with collapse if we didn't do so. And so hence we decided to change, the way that we were doing things. And it's bearing fruits. I understand that, you and I discussed this yesterday and we're discussing now the fact that, the Auditor General is not happy with this. But sometimes you have to do things differently. And, the Auditor General is unhappy. There'll be a time that, she will be happy with us. As you say, we've been able to drop some figures, and some of those have been very significant figures, like the ones that I've spoken to you about, like the legal bill to the lawyers.
It may be one thing to change the figures, but what you're actually doing when you change accounting standard is you aren't changing the figures, you're changing the rules. And isn't that what you've done?
Stephen, I'm not sure that we've changed, the rules. We've navigated our way around how we can fix the Road Accident Fund and fix it as quickly as possible. And obviously, we've fallen foul with the Auditor General as a result. I mean, we are open to sitting around the table and talk to the Auditor General and see how best, she can assist us, continue, to drop the figures and to make sure that we meet our responsibilities to our claimants, but at the same time, to make sure that we don't fall foul with the Auditor General. So there is room, to sit around the table and talk and find, an amicable way instead of going to the courts.
Okay, so you've lost in court, and in fact you're going to the Constitutional Court. And you're going to the Constitutional Court when, in fact, no one else agrees with you. So the Auditor General says you are wrong. The Transport Department told you not to go to court. They are your ministry. You're an entity under them. The National Treasury says that you are wrong, and you're still going to the Constitutional Court.
Well, Stephen, let's look. The CEO, the EXCO, they, obviously get advice from their attorneys on whether a different court is likely to come to a different outcome. And they listen to that advice. We appreciate the advice of the entities that you've spoken about. But what you must understand is that they don't run the operations of the Road Accident Fund. The EXCO does, the CEO does, the board, to some extent gets involved. And we get advice from our attorneys. And our attorneys, if they feel that, we could get a different outcome, we listen to the attorneys. It's an issue that is still open to, being debated between ourselves and the attorneys.
Well, no one else agrees with you on this. You're doing something no one else does, and you're presuming, and that a judge has already found to be wrong. And if that's the case, what possible hope can you have that you'll actually be right? Why is your legal advice so different to everyone else's?
Everyone else's is not legal advice. It's advice that we have received. Stephen, we're involved in a lot of court cases. Some of them we've won. Some of them we've lost. Some of them we've lost very badly. We keep learning from that. But as I said, it's an issue that is not cast in stone. It's an issue that, being debated between the lawyers and the CEO, the EXCO, and the board. And the CEO is open to reason, even to the entities that you've spoken about. We are open to sitting down and further with them, including the Auditor General, by the way, to say how best can we assist the Road Accident Fund, to save as much money as possible and to pay rightly to the claimants that, we are responsible for. Because we want to reduce the other bills that I've already spoken about. We've been paying too much to people we shouldn't be paying to.
Okay. There's another case. Medical aids used to be reimbursed for the money they paid for the treatment of people hurt in accidents. A person would suffer an accident, they would receive medical treatment, the medical aid would pay for their treatment, the Road Accident Fund would reimburse the medical aid. And what that meant was, because the role of the fund, as I understand it, is to compensate people in accidents. If you suffer 100 rands worth of damage in the accident, the Road Accident Fund makes you whole again. It reimburses the 100 rand. Now, in this case, you have people who are suffering an accident. They are made whole by the medical aid. The medical aid was made whole by you. Why did you stop reimbursing medical aids?
You're right. You're saying that, we're paying people that, are involved in accidents. We have a responsibility to the people that are, involved in accidents as far as the bills that are not paid by the medical aids. And by law, the medical aids are responsible for prescribed minimum benefits as well as emergency, medical benefits. That falls outside the scope of the Road Accident Fund. And we made it clear to the medical aid that we shouldn't be paying that because by law, it's not our responsibility. And Treasurer has issued a circular as well saying that we actually are not responsible for this. The High Court in September, Judge Kumalo says anybody who claims from the Road Accident Fund has to show, injury or law. The claimants, even those who are under the medical aid, are right to claim those, claims that are outside of the prescribed minimum benefits as well as the emergency, medical costs. And so that's what we pay. We're doing our responsibility, and the medical aids should actually take their responsibility as well. By reimbursing them, it was meaning that the medical aids were actually not taking any responsibility at all.
But you're the Road Accident Fund. It's your responsibility to deal with road accidents, not necessarily the medical aids.
But it's not our responsibility to pay pays prescribed minimum benefits, Stephen, and the emergency medical costs. That's a responsibility between you and the medical aides. That's an agreement between you and the medical aides. When you sign on the dotted line your contract, say to you, we are going to pay these benefits, and anything outside of that we're not going to pay. You can go to the road accident fund, and we rightly pay anything outside of those two.
Macintosh Paletta, the spokesperson for the Road Accident Fund there were one or two issues with that line. Do apologise for that. You were there, CFM, 19 minutes to 9. Your mediated conversation continues around the Road Accident Fund. We've heard from them now. Let's hear from Kaya Satole, a chartered accountant and financial analyst. Kaya, good morning, and thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners.
In a way, let's start with the accounting standards. It's an argument about accounting standards. Why are they different accounting standards in the first place?
So it is a bit of an old complexity, and the crux of the complexity is the question of what exactly does the Road Accident Fund actually do. So in the current dispensation, it is essentially regarded as an insurance company. And that means that the accounting standards relating to insurance companies are what it has been forced to apply essentially for a very long time. Now, what it wants to argue is that it actually administers social benefits, which is quite different from an insurance company. And the simple difference is that with an insurance company, you proactively sign up for an insurance contract, you get told exactly what you're covered for, and you get told what the insured event would be. In this case, it would be road accidents. Under social benefits, however, what triggers a social benefit payout is very different to what triggers an insurance payout. So historically, because the Road Accident Fund has been forced to use the insurance standard is quite prospective in its outlook, in that it says, for example, right now we're in December, the Road Accident Fund is obliged to estimate how many accidents there might be happening as we speak, and then how much those accidents might cost it. So it actually accounts for future liabilities that might arise. And that is how you end up with a 330 billion rand liability. Under a social benefit standard, the difference is that until there is a claim that is lodged and the claim has met the requirements for it being paid, then you don't have to account for it. So, of course, it benefits the Road Accident Fund for it to adopt the social benefit standard because it does indeed result in a massive reduction in liabilities. The problem, unfortunately, is that it is the Accounting Standards Board that then issues the type of accounting standards that public entities are allowed to use. And until now, the Road Accident Fund has not been able to convince the Accounting Standards Board to actually give it permission to depart from the insurance standard onto a social benefit standard. And so until that happens, the Auditor General has no choice but to say that these financial statements have been prepared on the wrong basis, and that is the point of departure between the Road Accident Fund and the Auditor General.
Okay, so the Auditor General, which I think is one of the parties in this case and spoke about it in their report released 2 weeks ago, the Auditor General has no choice but to implement what the Accounting Standards Board decides. It needs to take that rule and apply it to the Road Accident Fund. So this is really about the Road Accident Fund and the Accounting Standards Board.
Indeed, the Auditor General is actually caught in the middle. So if the Road Accident Fund came back tomorrow and said, here's a new directive from the Accounting Standards Board that allows us to switch from that old accounting standard to this new one, the Auditor General would happily audit the new one. But until that happens, the Auditor General has to apply the rules as they've been agreed to between the parties. Obviously, the Road Accident Fund now wants a difference in that. And for some odd reason, this conversation has been reduced to a battle between the Auditor General and the Road Accident Fund, rather than a question of will there ever be a meeting of the minds between the Road Accident Funds and the Accounting Standards Board, because until that happens, this impasse is obviously going to be quite permanent in nature.
How does the Accounting Standards Board decide which standard is used? I presume they have quite a set procedure. Government entities, different categories of those entities will all be managed in the same way, depending on what category they fall under.
So what the Accounting Standards Board would do is that if there are accounting standards that are published by other international peer bodies, in this case it would be the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board, what the Accounting Standards Board of South Africa would then do is that it would read that particular international rule and guideline, and then make a determination on whether it is to be applied in South Africa. That would be the first process. And then the second one would be whether any parts of it or any elements of it need to be tailored to fit the South African market, given the unique nature of the entities that we have here. So, of course, what triggered this particular course of action for the Road Accident Fund is that historically we actually didn't have a new, social benefits accounting standard. So a couple of years ago, the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board did actually issue an international social benefits standard. And as soon as the Road Accident Fund saw that, they felt that that was more aligned to their business model. So they obviously said, well, this is what we should be applying. And the only reason we couldn't apply it before is because it didn't exist. Now, of course, the processes at the Accounting Standards Board are subject to the concurrence of many affected parties. So you'd obviously need to consider whether other entities are going to be affected and whether the standard should be rolled out in its form or in a different form altogether. So the Accounting Standards Board hasn't finished that process. We actually do not know if they're even interested in exploring that. So until that process is finalized, the Road Accident Fund quite simply cannot adopt something that is not allowed in South Africa.
And so there's no way for the Road Accident Fund to actually even apply. I mean, is there a process that people could apply to the Accounting Standards Board and say, we don't want to use Accounting Standard X, we want to use Accounting Standard Y? And then that option's just not available because the board doesn't have the new standard.
Look, I do not believe that the Accounting Standards Board will be hostile to an approach that says, look, guys, as you've seen, there's been a new accounting standard that's been issued by your peer agencies, which is the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board. We feel that that is more aligned to our own business model. Can we then engage in a process of consultation, put together all the stakeholders that need to be there in order for the process of gazetting a new accounting standard to be started? So that is really what the battle should have been about. And of course, until the Road Accident Fund and the Accounting Standards Board indicate to us whether that process has been initiated and how far it is down the road, we're not really sure whether that is indeed the approach that has been taken. But that is actually how you solve this, in that you have to convince the Accounting Standards Board to accelerate the process of enabling South African entities that qualify for this new accounting standard to be able to adopt it.
Okay, is the Road Accident Fund on strong ground in wanting to change their standard in the first place? I mean, is there an argument to say they must keep the standard that they've been using for many years before this?
So I do think that there are definitely some considerations around whether this should indeed be regarded as a traditional insurance company. And I think the main difference, obviously, is that within an insurance contract, you know what the insured event is, you know who you are, and you pay a particular premium. Now, obviously, with the Road Accident Fund, it is quite different. The law simply says to them that you will cover these claims as they arise. And that, unfortunately, when it was conceptualized, the closest we could get to saying what is the accounting standard that is applicable to you, it was the insurance accounting standards that have been written for traditional insurance companies. So there's definitely a gap there. And then the secondary question is, well, is the Road Accident Fund then a social benefit organization like the South African Social Security Agency, for example? And of course, the definition of what a social benefit entity is also itself quite specific. So you have to be administering social benefits, and there have to be very clear rules about what triggers the payments of those social benefits. Now, in the instance of the Road Accident Fund, which has to cover, car accidents that happen universally across the country, it might be difficult to say that, well, actually, there are no triggers until there's a claim, because then the question would be, are you going to ignore the fact that there were 100 accidents that happened this morning, and you know that these claims are going to come? Because a lot of people that are traditional accountants would say, well, you're not being prudent. You're actually not planning properly because you know something has happened, but you're pretending that it hasn't happened until the claims come. And that means that your forward planning and your budgeting may itself be compromised. So there's definitely a very important conversation that has to be had about where exactly does the Road Accident Fund fit in. But until that conversation has been clarified and finalized, they're unfortunately stuck with accounting standards that says they must treat their claims as an insurance company would treat them.
Thank you very much indeed, Kai Satoli. Really do appreciate the time. Chartered accountant and financial analyst, as you can hear. In a moment, the view from Carol Payton, who, of course, is at News 24. She's a business writer there. That to come. You're with SAFM, 10 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, the N3 stays closed between Linfield Park and Umlas Road. It's a full closure both ways because of a truck crash and this spillage of molasses. Now, the truck has been righted and moved out of the way. The fire brigade have arrived and they've started to clear up the molasses. But there is a warning that this could run in for some time. This could take most of the morning to get this road reopened. There's a very heavy, enormous backlog, as you can imagine, with all those trucks that use that N3 and the commuting volumes between Pietermaritzburg and Durban on a daily basis. It's basically jammed on the N3 from Cato Ridge through the closure at Umlas Road and from Ashburton down to Linfield Park into the closure as well. And that's only half of it because there's very little movement on the R103, basically from Ashburton right through to Cato Ridge, both directions. It's extremely heavy. And even if you're using the alternative loop around the R56 and the Umlas Road via Thornville, between Thornville and Umlas Road, there's a whole pile of traffic backlogging there as well. So much volume. If you need to go Durban, Pietermaritzburg, either direction, make sure you've got a ton of extra time to get through what is a major incident. Constant and regular updates on Twitter at Traffic SA. The M13 from Hillcrest out towards Keyridge stays slow after an earlier collision. That's the M13 westbound. Joburg easing quite nicely. A bit of traffic still on the runs through Midrand between the old Joburg Road and Olifantsfontein Road. And Cape Town this morning has been a crash on the Lisbik Parkway coming up through Observatory on towards the N2. It's just under the bridge there, so that's quite slow. And plenty of traffic on the N1 backing up from Belleville through to Kuburg. Get a change. N7 south under pressure going through the Goodwood area towards a busy Four-Trekker Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continue your mediated conversation this morning around the Road Accident Fund. You've heard from the fund itself. You've heard also from Akaya Satole. Carol Payton is a business writer at News 24. Carol, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning, Stephen.
I suppose one of the key questions, or let me put it to you, is it a question worth asking? Under the old standard that the Road Accident Fund was using, it had liabilities of 300 billion rand. Under the new standard that it's using that the Accounting Standards Board doesn't like, its liabilities are now 30 billion rand. So suppose, are we allowed to ask why would they change the accounting standard now? What would the motive for that be?
It's strange because I don't think that there is a benefit to the people who run the Road Accident Fund, the board or the management. I can't see what the benefit would be in having this fight, because all they're doing is setting themselves up against the executive authority and causing difficulties. So I don't really understand how they would benefit. Yes, it does make their audit look better. But at the moment, because they're having this fight, they've been given an adverse opinion, and it seems to be that they are trying to get a better audit outcome. That's the motive. I don't know if that is linked in some way to KPIs or KPAs or something like that. But I would find that surprising if it were. But that is the only possible motive that I can think of.
And even then, I mean, it's a huge fight to have for a tiny benefit in your employment contract.
It is. It is a huge fight to have. And there is an element here of sort of kind of very eccentric approach taken by the executives of the Road Accident Fund. Not sure exactly why. But it does seem to be the case that there is a CEO there who's not the kind of person who could ever accept no for an answer. So they talk about, Macintosh Palella talking about having a dialogue and settling this out of court. But in fact, they only want one outcome, and that is to do it their way.
If the fund loses this case, suddenly their liabilities will be big again. They will be much bigger again. They'll be over 300 billion rand. What happens then? I mean, presumably it can't cover some of those. I don't know. Could it cover those liabilities? What would be the outcome of that?
Well, the liability of the Road Accident Fund has always been massive because of the kind of fund it is. And because, you could claim these massive lump sums. You could claim loss of earnings as a huge lump sum. If you were a foreign tourist, for instance, and you were visiting South Africa and you got injured in a car accident, and then you would claim your future loss of earnings for the next 20 years in pounds or dollars or whatever. And this is one of the reasons why the fund has got such massive liabilities. So that problem of the liabilities does have to be sorted out, because if they had to actually materialize, no, the state couldn't. The road accident fund couldn't pay those. So that the nature of the fund and the way benefits are dispersed is the root of the problem that needs to be solved, not the accounting standard, which just makes things look better when in fact they're still the same.
The other issue around medical aids, and I find this case fascinating, is the fund on strong grounds in refusing to pay out medical aids, and the medical aids are going to keep fighting that. I mean, this is a huge threat to them.
It is, because medical aids, these things are actuarially worked out, and that has not been factored in. That has not been, and we know the cost. And the rate, the high rate of road accident funds, of road accidents. So yes, it is a threat to them. And clearly the courts have said no. RAF, everyone is insured. You and me, maybe we're on medical aid, but you and me are also paying the road accident fund every single time we fill up with petrol. So that's where the road accident fund's getting its money from. We pay for that insurance every time we buy petrol. So I don't think that they've got any kind of leg to stand on, and the courts have made that quite clear. It's very odd that they would also, again, almost, believe that they are the sole right-thinking entity.
There's so many big court cases around the road accident fund now. I think it might be fair to ask, is the fund well managed? And I realise there are lots of different ways of assessing that. And we probably won't know until all of these court cases are finished as to who's right or not. And we live, unfortunately, Carol, as you know, in a cynical country, and particularly in a cynical time during a cynical country. Are there questions that is it too far to ask questions around whether it's being managed properly? Do we need to wait for the outcomes of these court cases?
I don't think we need to wait for the outcomes. I think that, the Auditor General said, actually, they said that the RAF has improved, with the exception of this insistence that they don't have these liabilities. In every other regard, the RAF seem to have improved slightly. So I don't think that's so much the issue. Unlike some of the other some of the other funds, which are also which are much worse run. I think that the issue is that the RAF, the executives they're just barking up the wrong tree. So long, because the thing that needs to be solved is the way the fund works. Now, there's a bill that was introduced in September, which is going to change. I don't know if you change the way the fund works. I don't know if you remember, like way back in the 2000s, early 2000s, there was a statutory commission into the road accident fund. It sat for years, came up with a report, and it said this system of calculating the liability of calculating payouts doesn't work. It's the state can't afford it. The state can't be paying people for loss of earnings in massive lump sums. And that bill, a bill was written, and that bill went all the way through parliamentary process. The lawyers absolutely hated it, because this is their livelihoods to litigate on these cases, because the bill said we're not going to have a whole lot of litigation. We're going to just say there's a no-fault system. Everyone gets paid, and you paid in an annuity. You don't get your massive lump sum of millions and millions. And that bill was killed in the last days of the Zuma administration. So finally, someone got in there and killed it, and it's now back. And it's just come back in September. But there isn't going to be time to pass it this Parliament. But that's the problem that needs to be solved. And lawyers are going to hate me for saying this, because it's saying, this practice of some rich people getting millions and millions out of the road accident fund, and lawyers taking so much money, has to stop.
Carol Payton, thank you very much indeed. A good note on which to end. Carol Payton is a business writer at News 24. My thanks also to the Chartered Accountant and Analyst, Kaya Satole, and starting us off today, the spokesperson for the Road Accident Fund, Macintosh Pelela. Kathy is next. We will be with you bright and early tomorrow from Madu, Stanza, Zilma, myself. Look after yourself. You're with SFM, leading the conversation. It's 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour: independent candidates' role highlighted and teachers moved from township schools due to crime. Good morning. The former chairperson of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Electoral Reform, Vali Musa, has highlighted the value of independent candidates to the country's political system. This after the Constitutional Court dismissed the application by the Independent Candidates Association and Build One South Africa. The two organizations sought to have the Electoral Amendment Act declared unconstitutional. They argued